All right, we will call this meeting of the October 10th Lower Country Township Planning Commission to order. First item on the agenda is approval of the July 28th, August 8th, and September 12th, 2023 meeting minutes. Does anyone want to make a motion to approve those minutes?
Yes, I make a motion to approve, I believe it's July 27th, August 8th, and September 12th, 2023 meeting minutes.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second that.
Any discussion? Motion or all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We have approval. The next item on the agenda is the 6130 Sauerkraut Lane minor subdivision. I believe there's a representative here. If you'll come to the table and introduce yourself.
Good afternoon. My name is Joe Renko from Black Forest Engineering, and I'm the engineer on the project. And I have the applicant, Noel Attia, with me.
All right, you can begin.
Okay, so first of all, thank you for again taking the time to let us present tonight. There was definitely some conversations behind the scenes that we were sort of told, or we thought we were going to maybe be tabled tonight or pulled from the agenda because we still have some technical comments. And maybe we're going to still be in technical review. Upon discussing that with the applicant, we kind of went through this letter, and I think that we just have a couple of things that maybe we want to just talk about in real time with the Planning Commission. So I'll just do my best to keep this really short because I know you have a busy agenda. So this is our second review letter from the township engineer. We thought that with after the first submission, we thought that we pretty well addressed everything. There's still some comments in this letter. There's a total of 17 comments. I counted before the meeting. There's only 6 of those comments are comments that we actually can do something address with, and some of them are as minor as drafting and adding some dimensions to the plans. Don't have an issue with this, and I definitely think that we've been working with the township staff, who's obviously been wonderful to work with. I feel like there's an echo. The township engineer, planning director, everyone's been great to work with. So we're moving forward, but time is very critical to the applicant. The applicant doesn't want to miss another month and potentially 2 months to have a letter that really, I say that I don't think it's mostly drafting and maybe some minor engineering comments. We expected to get a conditional approval and move this project on. So with all due respect, the only comment now that seems to be, and again, I'll let this township engineer speak on their behalf too, but my understanding from a conversation with Brian McAdam was the big issue that everyone sort of felt uncomfortable with was that there's a comment about the FEMA floodplain. So I was asked to address this on record tonight that this project, a subdivision in this township can't happen under the zoning ordinance if you're in a floodplain. And some of you may know the history of this, but the applicant was before the zoning board twice. My company, we did a HECRAS study. We provided evidence, a hydraulic study, a plan to the zoning board, and they found it satisfactory that the project was actually where we were proposing these 2 lots. It was not in the floodplain, the 500-year or the 100-year or 500-year. There was a decision that was issued by the zoning board. There were no conditions that the applicant would have to amend the FEMA floodplain. It was basically just that we would have to proceed in order to subdivide, we would just have to go through the subdivision process. And it was actually the way it was worded, and the applicant's attorney forwarded this to me shortly before the meeting. It was condition 8 of the the zoning approval was if the requested variance is granted, which it was, the proposal would still need to be submitted to the township for subdivision approval. At that time, the township engineer will approve the floodplain study. And they mean the floodplain study that I prepared. So there were, and again, I say this in all fairness to the applicant, that if the township wanted the floodplain to be changed by FEMA or through FEMA, when the township zoning board issued this, that would have been the appropriate time to make a condition to amend the floodplain. So I think what we're asking for tonight is just some clarity on exactly what the township is asking for us to do with the floodplain, and then what in the ordinance supports that, because there's unfortunately in the saldo, it doesn't really appear that there is anything that requires the applicant to amend the FEMA floodplain, which could be a very timely process.
Brian, do you want to start with the, because this is still in technical review, correct?
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
So the requirement is you can't build within floodplain. And as shown on FEMA maps, these houses are currently in the floodplain as shown on the FEMA maps. So that's really the concern, that as,
I'm sorry, she didn't hear you.
yeah, as shown, the
FEMA line.
the proposed buildings are in the FEMA floodplain. You adjusted that floodplain relative to your HECRAS study, which we actually also still need to review. We have not reviewed that study. Do not believe that was submitted. But either way, FEMA is the one that regulates where the floodplains are. And if you can't build in the floodplain, you're gonna have to get the floodplain adjusted in order to build in there. This all comes down to just verifying that you're safely building. The future development is safe. We don't want to see any future residents flooded out. We really don't want to understand some of these houses. One of them is for your children. We wouldn't want to see them get flooded out. This really comes down to a safety issue. But you're going to have the FEMA floodplain adjusted in order to build within.
So clarification then for the record, again, what ordinance, I apologize for asking this, what ordinance section are you citing that we have to change the FEMA floodplain? Because the condition from the zone, and I don't mean to sound argumentative,
No, it's fine.
but
I understand.
what was discussed, what the applicant was sort of led to believe was as a condition of the zoning approval to accept that the floodplain was different, and that's all in this, it's all in the written decision from the township, that the township engineer would approve the flood study that I did.
Which we need to, yes. We have not reviewed and approved your changes to the floodplain.
So are you asking FEMA to review and approve it, or CKS to review and approve it? That's where we're just trying to get some clarification.
So
This is
FEMA is the one that
ridiculous.
regulates. FEMA regulates the floodplain.
They regulate the floodway. 100-year floodway.
They also delineate
They delineate the floodplains, but you said regulate. So I'm just.
Joe, you do need to speak into the mic because we're,
Something wrong with this.
yeah, you can slide the other one.
Is that better? Yeah, that's much better. So I didn't mean to interject, but I want to put this on record too. FEMA regulates the 100-year floodway. Even without my study, the floodway is shown on that, depicted on that plan that everyone sees. That's blue. I didn't touch that. That's the 100-year floodway that FEMA regulates. The 100-year floodplain and a 500-year floodplain, that's the township has an adopted flood ordinance, and that's what the township's responsible for. And again, I don't want to sound like I'm being argumentative. I'm here to obviously, stick up and defend for my client, but there's some, I guess, some disparity between what was issued in the zoning ordinance of written decision, and things are sort of changing now with our second technical review letter, which is obviously that's a little bit upsetting for the applicant. And again, I expected to be pulled from the agenda tonight, but we're here just to sort of air this and get it on record as to what we really need to do now moving forward to get this out of technical and move it on with a conditional approval.
Before Brian goes any further, I think the one thing that would be helpful for those watching at home, those in the audience, and for our planning commission to be aware of is we do have our chapter 27, a stormwater ordinance, which has been adopted. Lower Macungie Township does have very stringent stormwater standards, and through our ordinances, they're there for a reason. All you need to do is go online and see some of the news reports on it. This is a uniform thing that anybody coming in with a subdivision and land development throughout the township needs to follow through on when a FEMA floodplain issue is identified. We have several other projects that are currently in the process right now. It's the same type of situation. Until the township engineer can assure us through our ordinances with the floodplain that there is not an issue. And if a modification is necessary, that process is completed. We generally don't proceed forward in the subdivision and land development process. We have a proposal right down the street that's been going through that process now for many months. So it's a uniform thing that all projects that are identified as being part of in the floodplain go through. So, we're being fair. We treat everybody exactly the same. So to waive this off would not be fair to other applicants who are also going through a similar process.
So what would the township potentially be waiving off? Like as far as an ordinance requirement or a written requirement that requires an applicant to go to FEMA and revise something if they're in the 500-year floodplain?
You cannot build in the 500-year floodplain per the township ordinance.
Which ordinance? That's what I need. That,
27A.
Chapter 27A.
and 27 is part of zoning and we have a variance for that.
You have a variance.
You do have a
to
variance.
You had a variance to subdivide. You did not have a variance to construct
Well,
structure.
if you're playing word semantics, we're not asking to build anything right now anyway. We're only asking to subdivide. That was made very clear by the township engineer that the only thing that we're asking for right now is a subdivision of 2 lots. That's the only thing the township is responsible to approve right now. You're not approving a
So-
driveway, you're not approving a building, you're not approving anything else.
So the zoning, as you're stating, that the zoning approval states that you need to get approval from the township engineer to build or for land development relative to the floodplain. We need to review and approve the flood study. In order for us to review and approve the flood study, one, you need to provide us with the HECRA study so we can review it.
And what it was submitted, because I was told that I didn't submit it, but it's part of the evidence from the
Okay.
zoning hearing. So I just want to make it
Okay,
clear.
so it wasn't submitted to us,
It was submitted to the township.
submitted to the township for the zoning as part of the zoning application.
Right, when the township was having
Okay.
you guys kind of look at this, look at everything.
We have not seen it because it was not part of the land development.
Okay,
So
which,
which we're happy to review it. We're happy to look at it, confirm the elevations and make sure that the adjustment makes sense relative to the existing grade that's out there. That being said, still are not willing to provide a recommendation for approval with houses shown in the FEMA floodplain. So I mean, you're gonna have to get the floodplain revised in order to build in there. And honestly, from an insurance perspective, and I guess I'm getting off topic a little bit, but you have floodplain on the property or your houses are in the floodplain in the FEMA regulated flood.
yeah, the houses right now, one of the lots is in the 100-year floodplain, which means you'd have to get insurance for lot number 2. But this isn't something that's under the purview of the planning commission right now anyway. So the township's position is that the applicant must get FEMA approval to change the map in order to subdivide this property.
In order to build a house. Yeah.
But we're not here tonight. I don't want to sound, I know I am being argumentative now because
You're here for subdivision.
we're here only for subdivision. So are you going to hold us up for subdivision because you're saying that we can't build? Because we don't want to build right now, right?
Then what's the rush? Sorry.
Well, then can we ask for a conditional approval for the subdivision? If, as long as before we build anything, we get an approval from FEMA.
But then we have on record a plan that's been submitted to the township that shows those structures in the floodplain. And that's the only thing that we have on record. We'd be approving that.
I think we can't approve.
But those are imaginary buildings anyway.
Hold on,
because you're not
Joe,
reviewing them.
Joe.
Yeah, yeah.
Hold on.
Yeah.
I think we can't approve lots that are not constructible. If you have a lot, we can't let you create a lot that you can't build a house on. Not. Yeah, if you cannot build on it, we can't let you create a lot that's entirely in a floodplain. Until we show that the lot is not in a floodplain relative to the map adjustment.
So,
we
just,
can't physically create that lot.
so one more time, I'm just going to just rehash this. The township's position tonight is that the applicant must get FEMA to amend those FEMA lines before you'll let us move on with the subdivision. Is that what you're saying?
So my recommendation is that
This is yes.
hold on. Well, first off, we need to review the HECRES study. We need to have a comfort level with the HECRES. So we are okay with the information you've provided, we could recommend to the planning commission, if we have that comfort level, we agree with what you've shown on the plan, then we may be able to make a recommendation to move it forward. But you won't be able to record that plan until you have the FEMA map revision. So you may be able to move past planning.
No, that's my.
You may not be able to record.
So
Does
this,
that answer your
so the
question?
township, I think it does. I'm going to summarize what you just said. The township's position is that this subdivision cannot move forward, hence be recorded and
Recorded,
move
yes.
forward until till the applicant amends the FEMA lines. And that's the township's position tonight.
Yeah, that would be our 27A. It's right in our ordinance.
Can't build in a floodplain. We need to
And-
amend.
And I'll just remind you, gentlemen, that we were before the zoning board for this. And I'm good to go with that. If that's the final say. All right,
Thanks, Joe.
sorry, guys. Do you have anything else, Paul, you want to add?
No, they'll hear from where.
Okay. And this microphone, the sponge fell off it, so it looks like it's rotted out.
Thank you. All right, we'll move to the next item on the agenda. Al Maqasid Learning Center, West Campus conditional use. Yes. All right, lots of familiar faces, but if you all please introduce yourself.
Eric Schock from Fitzpatrick, Lenson, Buba.
John Rodas, Founding Director of Al-Maqasid.
Bud Newton from Newton Engineering.
If you want to start by telling us where you're
Sure,
at.
sure. So, I think as you're aware, because we have been here before,
Yes.
a couple of times with respect to the overall project, and then what we're down to as from the zoning perspective is the last kind of sliver of what we need to do. We've gotten zoning relief with respect to the expansion of the prayer room. We got zoning relief at last month's meeting, based upon a chart that Mr. Newton made outlining the east and west campuses and what each of the uses are proposed for each side, the west and the east side. The zoning board last month ruled that with respect to the West Campus proposal, to the extent any relief was needed for what I'll call the conglomeration of uses, because as you know, this use is not allowed as a discrete use under your ordinance. We're permitted to have those uses, but since in the Orlik zoning in which this property is located, the school component is a conditional use, we need to go through a conditional use hearing with the commissioners, and we need a recommendation on that conditional use from you. Bud has a presentation that we can run through, probably pretty similar to what you saw last time, but probably a little bit more detail on the
Yes.
uses itself.
And it does respond to some of the comments that were raised in review letters.
Okay. So we can go right into that or wait for your engineer to weigh in.
I mean, because we have seen it before, maybe you want to start just by highlighting the things that have changed or something that's different. I mean, everyone okay with that? I think everyone was here at the last meeting.
Okay, we'll quickly run through this then. You know, you are familiar with the site. The site is out in the western part of the township. It's surrounded by Albertus Road and Schoenig Road. It's directly northwest of the East Campus that we talked about. And the purpose of this property is that, as Eric mentioned, and John can get into a little further, the East Campus is primarily for students of post-high school. This is going to be for age 2 through high school level students. Next slide shows the area around it. It's an open field. It's part of the Lehigh Valley South Industrial Park. It's open vacant fields right now. There was some improvements that are done already. There is a roadway system in there for the Lehigh Valley South Industrial Park. There is detention ponds and stuff in place right now. The next slide shows the site itself and some of the improvements that we have proposed. You know, we're looking at one large building there. There was some question about the buildings. We'll get into that here slightly. The next slide shows the site. There was one question that came up in the previous review letter. The driveways to the site are supposed to be one way in and one way out, which handles some of the circulation patterns. The west driveway would be one way in. The east driveway would be one way out on the industrial drive. There's no driveways that are proposed to come out onto either Albertus Road or Schoenig Road. The next slide goes into what Eric was talking about with the next site parking. Next, different than what I have.
Different order.
Yeah. This goes into the site parking. You can see that we are having a proposal for elementary schools with 250 students, middle school and junior high school with 200 students, high school 200 students, and the daycare 150 students. So basically, we're going to have two classrooms of 25 students per each age group, running from age 2 up through grade 12.
Bud, hang on. I think we opened the older one.
Oh,
Give me a moment here.
Is this newer than what we have?
Yeah, I have not seen this one before.
Okay, yeah. September 18th
yeah.
is in the file.
Some of this is more similar to what we used at the zoning hearing board, and then there was a couple of things we changed to address. This is a chart now.
So that chart is what I had mentioned.
Yeah, the items in the fourth column are what we were using in the East Campus, and then items in the sixth column are what we have accessory uses for the West Campus. So it gives you an idea of the uses. Those are the things that were approved by the zoning hearing board as uses that we can have as accessories on as part of this campus.
And probably the only component that merited a little bit more discussion was, if you recall, for the East Campus, which was going to be college age, the seminary, there's no dormitory use in the zoning ordinance, but when we went for that approval, dormitories were permitted. There is a potential for a boarding school component with this school. So the way we discussed it at the zoning board was, to the extent that requires a special exception as a use similar to uses allowed, that's part of their approval. But in their minds, it was going to be addressed when we came in and needed the conditional use for the school anyway.
John's gonna discuss why this school is gonna be different than almost anything. There's nothing like this in the country right now. So there may be a need here to have support for students from throughout the country that may want to come to this location. So he'll go through it once we get finished with this presentation. I think the next slide then shows, this next slide answers the one question that came up. We're trying to show with this slide before that the new building is going to follow the same architectural scheme as what we had on the East Campus. There was some question where we have one building or 5 buildings. The 5 buildings are on the East Campus. The West Campus is going to be one building, but we're carrying the architectural theme over from the 5 buildings that's on the East Campus. So I'm sorry, Brian, I confused things there with the way how we were showing it on the slide. But that was the idea here, that we're showing that we're carrying some of these themes over so that this looks like one campus when it's completed. The next was then what we started to talk about before, which was more breakdown of the students and then how we came up with required parking that we had. We're showing that we need 189 spaces based on ITE trip parking generation, and that we have 221 spaces on site. We also showed on site that we will have the drop-off areas, and we also had the electric vehicle charging stations and several other items. A lot of that's going to take a lot of more definition when we come through the land development process, but we're showing you initially that we are proposing to do that. We have some shuttle park pickup areas and stuff where we're going to be able to shuttle traffic between the East Campus and the West Campus. Next slide just showed some of the amenities that we were going to have on site. Again, similar to what we're going to do with the East Campus, but just to give you an idea of what we're proposing here. It's going to be a an outdoor-oriented, holistic treatment. And again, John will go through a little more of that than I can. He's more familiar with what they're doing. Next slide shows, one of the things concerns was movement between the 2 campuses. And, we are going to have to look at what we're going to be doing at the intersection of Albertus Road and Schoening Road. At the very least, we're going to be putting up the advanced pedestrian flashers with the rapid flashing devices on the pedestrian signs. Whatever we do out here, we're going to have to go through PennDOT. We are going to have to do a traffic study as part of the land development proposal. From our experience in this area, the problems with traffic in the past have been mostly truck traffic. So we looked at that right now. We do agree that we're going to have to do a full-blown traffic study as part of the land development plans, which we intend to do. We're envisioning that we're going to have to study this intersection. We're going to have to study Industrial Drive and Schoening Road. And we're probably going to have to look at Schoening Road and 100. That had previously been a problem, but that was, as you can see on the next slide, that was a problem when we originally looked at the Lehigh Valley South Industrial Park. But as part of that approval, Jandal had to relocate the intersection. That was the only car problem that previously existed down here. But Jandal relocated that, has a new signalized intersection out at that intersection. So what we anticipate that the traffic impact study is going to show is that there's not going to be any particular problems at that intersection. We may have to do some traffic signal timing changes or something. At Industrial Parkway and Schoening Road, we may have to add turn lane or something. But again, we'll do whatever the traffic study shows, and then we're going to have to go into a full-blown study at Albertus and Schoening Road time. We're going to look and see if it does want a traffic light at that location. If it does, we're going to have to study a traffic light. We're also probably going to have to study a roundabout at that location. But we'll get into that at the time. But it's not, the vehicle traffics the vehicle cars have not been a problem out there as far as my knowledge of all the years that I've been studying traffic in the area. It's more the truck traffic. And we did provide some analysis And the next slide, that we should have, gonna have much less truck traffic with this proposal. We think we're only gonna have like 5 trucks a day as opposed to 44 trucks a day if we had a light industrial use on this site. So we should have less truck traffic. So as far as what you would normally be looking for is in conditional use, we have less truck traffic than we would have if this was developed as was originally anticipated as part of the Lehigh Valley South Industrial Park. So with that, we're looking for your recommendation so that we proceed with the conditional use hearing so that they can decide if they're going to proceed with purchasing this property.
And okay, I think if we look at this, there's not much else in the letter that's problematic, other than it seems like there's a bit of a line in the sand now, which is Bud's opinion that he's provided enough traffic information for us to move forward. And then the letter now saying we want the traffic impact study. I mean, it says what it says. We have Bud and your engineers just have differing opinion on that. And I guess.
Well, here's what we were reading in the letters. Item G in the CKS letter says the trip generation information previously provided has been reviewed. Review by Heinrich and Klein Associates, Inc. was attached to our previous review and included by reference. Ultimately, a traffic impact fee will be required and conditioned to the land development approval. And we anticipated that with the impact fee, this traffic impact study would be done, and that'll all be done with the land development plan proposal. We know that we're going to have to do the impact study, and we're going to have to comply with whatever that impact study shows. So, I don't think there's any question.
Yeah, I mean, I think your willingness is being heard, but I think that the traffic study is still based on some assumptions, and they may be correct, but that, I mean, we still don't have the traffic study, and I think that's like you said, that is the line in the
It
sand.
doesn't really make a lot of sense to do the study at this point in time. It doesn't make, until they know if they're going to purchase the property or not. The idea of getting the conditional use approval now is for them, they have to close on the property. The owner is not giving them an extent, up to this point in time, wasn't giving them an extension of time, close on the property. So they wanted to know if they're going to be able to use the property for their intended use. And in whatever we come up with the study, they're going to have to do those improvements anyway. So it's a moot point. We're going to have to do what the traffic study shows that we have to do.
Brian or Nate, you want to add on to?
The only thing that I would add, and similar to the last applicant, and this is just something where we've worked very closely with Al Maqasid. Again, we continue to support the application fully. It's just traffic continues to be one of those items similar to stormwater and FEMA floodplains where we have to treat everybody equally with every application. And so when one is coming in for a conditional use, it's been past township practice for about the last anywhere between 7 and 10 years, I think, to take into account traffic concerns as part of a conditional use process. So it's difficult for us where we need to be fair with everybody. And if the township engineer has highlighted a concern where that's an issue, we have had other applicants in a similar situation look into it prior to a conditional use. So we just got to treat everybody uniformly across the board.
Well, Bud's going to have to inquire as to this. I mean, I don't know the difference of levels, but I mean, is there something less than just saying a TIS that you believe will get them
Yeah,
their
well,
answer?
that's what we thought we were giving them with, giving the township, giving the trip generation, giving you what we thought to give you an idea of what the traffic impact is going to be. And we've been asking for the last several months, is there anything else that we specifically that you were looking for that we could give? And we hadn't gotten an answer to those questions.
All right. Well, traffic is certainly one of our concerns, obviously. And I mean, as you can see, you guys are adding more than 1,000 vehicles per day to that road, above what the previous approval had shown. 19 19,000 or 1,900 vehicles per day. So while that certainly is a concern of ours, it's something we want to see some more information. We also want to see how that impacts the surrounding intersections. You had mentioned roundabout, sorry, on a side, you said roundabout, which intersection were you talking about? As far as roundabout?
If we're going to do a traffic signal at that intersection,
At
one of the things
which
PennDOT requires
intersection?
us to look
Sorry.
at as an alternative is a roundabout.
At Shonik and.
At Shonik and Albertus.
Okay, thank you. So that being said, traffic is certainly a concern of ours. One of the other pieces that's an issue that we're having is that we're struggling with is just the site layout in general. There's some issues with the drive aisles being in buffer areas, which will shrink down the parking lot, that main drive aisle that comes in from call it the left side of the plan. There's conflicts with cars and the buses, loading and unloading. We'd like to look at a little closer. I think as a condition of the conditional use, typically you require that the plans are in general conformance with the plans as provided. The land development plans are in general conformance with the layouts provided. I think addressing some of these layout issues are important. Additionally, there seems to be what I think you guys are doing is incredible, honestly, and I think is a really great cause. But there seems to be some ambiguity about what exactly you're looking to do. There's a lot of we'd like to do this, but we're not sure. We're making adjustments, and it's hard to provide an approval sometimes with something that's not specific.
Yeah, and I think that's what that chart was supposed to do.
And okay, so
So Nick, could you go back to that one? Thanks a lot. Yeah, so we got that same comment before,
Mhm.
and I believed we had resolved it by providing this,
okay,
which is the zoning officer reviewed everything that was proposed, ruled that for the East Campus, everything identified had previously been approved as part of the original special exception for the East Campus. And on the West Campus, we went to zoning with that exact list. And we're going to the board and coming to you with that exact list with everything possible. We took out the catch-all, but obviously, might there not be, I don't know, a multimedia studio at one point? Maybe there won't be.
Mhm.
But if we didn't say that it could be there, then we would have to come back to get that approved. I mean, I guess it's no different than someone who comes in and says, I want to build a 1,000,000 square foot building. And then they come in, they pull a building permit to build half of it, and they don't come back and build the rest of it. I mean, that happens, but you went and got approved what you ideally would want to do. So, I mean, it's tough because in all candor, you don't, and I've said this a couple of times in meetings, you don't have like, a campus type ordinance. I mean, you allow different school levels, you allow places of worship, but you don't really have like a university designation where you would have a lot of these uses. I mean, look at Lehigh University. I mean, that list there probably is identical to what I could find if I walked the Lehigh campus. And they don't have as much difficulty. Not that when I say difficulty, not that anybody's being difficult about it. They don't have as much difficulty fitting into, a use in the ordinance because a university is allowed and it's in a district that lets you do all of these types of things. So I get the question, but that was at this point, that's about what we could do is say, here in an ideal world, at full build out, if we could do if we raise the funds and the project goes to its fullest scope, that is what that would be there.
Yeah, well, let me say something, John, before you do. Typically in Brian's defense and my defense to some extent, as engineers, we like to have things defined. when we go to do something. And this has been a very dynamic process. When we got into this, I don't think John or his folks knew exactly what they were getting into, but they had the opportunity here to get this other property, but they have a limited amount of time that they had to move on it. So we've been developing this as we're going through, and we've been throwing ideas back and forth of what are you going to have. And like we said, there's nothing like this exactly that exists right now in the United States. So we're trying to come up with something a little bit different. And the important thing for them right now is to know that they can move forward with this and be able to do this and be able to acquire this property while they can. Period. Now, go ahead, John.
No, that's what I was going to address. And I think in the beginning, that was the approach, as we mentioned when we sat inside, was that we were trying to go into maximize our potential use of the property. And as we realized that, oh no, we really need to hone in on exactly what we're doing. We spent quite a bit of time thinking about it. And that's what you see on the chart. This is exactly what we're asking approval for. So we've actually narrowed it down from that kind of vague, broadness in the beginning.
Okay. So what you're saying is that anything you're going to build is going to be this or less.
Correct. Yes, as is mentioned on this list. Yes,
That actually does, and but is correct. As an engineer, I like to see everything,
sure.
all the
Just,
I's
yeah,
dotted,
we're
T's
being
crossed,
fully
everything.
transparent. Yeah.
Yes.
And none of that other stuff bothers me at all.
You love it. Ah,
Yeah, and to do the traffic impact study for this is gonna take several months to do. I want to sit down with Andrews and CKS and go through what exactly we have to look at. 'Cause we're gonna have to really do that as part of, we're gonna be submitting in the next few months, we're submitting the land development plans for the East Campus. And I think we're just should really be looking at both campuses together as part of this study. So I really want to get the scope of that study together.
I have a
probably before we do it.
Yeah, I have a question, which maybe is, maybe you'll say crazy for asking this, but what if we propose a much smaller number of students as the initial approval? So they know they can do the school, they reduce that to something everybody's comfortable with, and say, you come back to increase the number of students when you get the traffic study.
What, can I quick guess?
Oh. Hey, you got one of those mics too.
A little close, yeah.
Yeah.
When was the older traffic study done? What year was that?
But it's not done for
I-
this
I-
project.
I
it's
know,
for-
but I'm
I don't think there's
curious,
been a
because I know
traffic-
you're saying you're
I
kind
don't
of
think there's
trying
been a
to
traffic
apply.
study done for this since the Lehigh Valley South Industrial Park was done, which was probably in the late eighties.
Oh, wow. Yeah, and there's been some, I
And
mean,
that was
even
all-
just,
I
'cause
was
I
looking
thought
at-
you were gonna say like
I was looking at that as all.
21 and one
yeah.
was done or something, because they've closed roads too in that area. So I mean, there's significant change. I
Yeah.
mean, you're gonna need to have some
Yeah, it's-
idea of the traffic. There's two roads that are closed, so that like Shonik's the only
And,
thing that
and, you know,
feeds from the one side. Yeah.
1980s
Lock
Lower
Ridge-
Country is very
plans for
different.
Lock Ridge and stuff came in '88, but it
Yeah.
wasn't built until, the 2010,
Yeah.
2020.
No, I mean, I
Maybe,
think this is a
so.
great plan. I like what you guys are offering, to the community. But like what Nate had said, I mean, we certainly have our requirements and the traffic study is something that is required. So
Yeah.
I'm
So-
leaning on that.
And even,
side.
and sorry,
Yeah,
to talk
yeah,
over you,
yeah. No,
but
that's
even,
okay.
even with the lower number, I mean, yes, that mentally resolves it for us, but doesn't officially resolve it for us. So it's this piece of information that is required,
Mhm.
and it's hard to look past that. I mean, we face you guys a lot here. You know that we like to have the information in front of us, all of it.
No, we're
And
talk-
it's
we're talk-
very
we're-
challenging to approve something that we don't have all of the.
Well, we're
information.
talking about a conditional use, and you
I
guys
understand
can
that.
set conditions, so if the condition is we satisfy the conditions of what the future traffic impact study shows,
Mhm.
wouldn't that be a viable condition?
I understand what you're getting at, yes, but I mean, we're still requiring that information. I know you're willing to do it, but if we're still requiring the information and that scenario works in this case, but I don't know that it works in future cases. Not for your project, but other projects that we would be overlooking.
But what information could you furnish to Andy and CKS, say, prior to one of the upcoming meetings that might allay some of their concerns, especially if we're looking at initially lower numbers?
We're gonna, I really think we need to sit down and have a scoping meeting as to what they want to have in the final traffic impact study. But, if there's something that they want right now that make them feel a little more comfortable, we do have the grade groups and stuff like this, and we can give them a better idea of how many years we think it's gonna be till some of this gets developed. Because we're talking about, this is probably gonna be a, 10 to 20-year build-out period for this. So it's not anything that's gonna happen overnight.
Can we resolve to find some time, say in the next week or two, for all the parties to sit together in person, not via Zoom, to go over this?
We're
That
gonna
might
have to-
assist us moving forward at a future meeting towards an approval then?
Well, they may have to close before that, but I'm gonna be tied up. I have my hip surgery scheduled for October 24th. October 24th now, so I have less than 2 weeks.
So October 23rd or before?
Yeah.
Do I hear a motion?
We do have you up and walking.
Be a little tough to do a traffic impact study between now and October 23rd. But I would like to get the scope, defined and what we need and what you need to do. And they would like to at least have a warm and fuzzy feeling that they go ahead with closing on the property.
Yeah, I mean,
Let's get that sit down scheduled.
Yep.
I think that that's the key, and it might very well be the last item that we need to address.
and we recognize your urgency. I mean, it was just like the other project, and it's like almost every project that comes in front of us. There's always urgency, and this one has probably a larger dollar sign in that urgency, but it doesn't make it any different. I mean, the process should be followed each time, and that makes it easier for you guys later as well. And by you guys, the two of you who are here frequently.
Um, i- In the letter, number 1, I just want to make sure everybody's comfortable with the explanation. That's the only zoning issue really raised by was that wording. Did everybody kind of understand? So we're comfortable on that component of it? Because John can explain a little bit more about it, but how that's being handled. Just want to make sure it's clear.
Zoning hearing board said that the township will deal with that on conditional use.
Well, the zoning hearing board said to the extent to have the boarding requires, if you remember, we went for a special exception, and that special exception was under the section that said catch-all, uses that are similar. That was the only one where they said, well, is that a school and it should be part of the conditional use? And I think they resolved to say to the extent that is part of the special exception, it's part of the special exception. But by the same token, a couple of the board members, and we don't have the written decision yet, did have the comment of, well, it's part of the school, so will that be part of the conditional use? So I think it's approved. I would say that we didn't need a variance for it because you certainly could approve it as something similar, right? Because a school's allowed, a place to house kids for that school, I think was rightfully within their jurisdiction to say it's part of the special exception. But certainly, I see it as not being unrelated to the conditional use when you're going for a school either, right? I just don't think, I think it's allowed one way or the other. It's not prohibited in that district. And that's my explanation to that zoning issue.
Yeah, it's weird because it's almost jurisdictional, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
It's.
Yeah. And I come back to,
Who gets to decide? it?
yeah, I come back to because you don't have a dormitory, right?
Yeah.
I mean, when you think about it, you could cobble this all together if somewhere you allowed dormitories, because that would be where all schools from top to bottom, boarding schools up to
Yeah.
universities would be allowed in that district then. And it'd be the same as picking to allow colleges there if you allow dormitories somewhere, because it's certainly a necessary component, I would think, of any college age. Now, but a boarding school, it's not uncommon, right? I mean, the Hill School's not that far away.
They don't know if
That was
they're
part
doing
of our
boarding yet.
testimony, Mark. We
Yeah.
talked about the Hill School and
Oh,
private
yeah.
schools like.
And Moravian used to have boarding. I don't think they do anymore, but like Moravian Academy had boarding years
Mm.
ago. They stopped it. It's not as common, but it is, to my knowledge, John, it's not uncommon with religious-based schools, for school-age children. Yeah, particularly yeshivas, I think, are often for. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, I understand your concept.
Let's discuss that more, I guess.
Yeah, before we get to the hearing, we can talk about how you want to handle that, but I think it's covered one way or the other.
Yeah,
Just needs to make sense. to
we just gotta
everybody.
make sure the right body.
Because candidly, you raised the only odd zoning, the oddest part of the zoning in this case is the dormitory issue.
Any additional comments?
If I may, I would like your feedback or thoughts regarding, in addition to the traffic considerations, what are your thoughts on the combination of traffic and safety considerations? So I think of one road in, one road out, 1,000 people, buses, traffic dumpsters, deliveries. If there's an emergency where EMT, fire department, police department needs to get in, what happens? I see this almost as a logjam, right? If there are people in this U-shaped in and out, what is the remedy in the event of an emergency? And we know with these large campus school facilities across the country, unfortunately, we're experiencing situations where sometimes these campuses go on lockdown. They're true safety considerations. And so I understand the traffic assessment that needs to happen, but I just would like to have a broader understanding of what you are thinking more holistically, in addition to traffic, but also safety considerations, given that you are dealing with babies from daycare all the way to young adults. And so, again, from just humor me, help me understand how this is going to be addressed.
Typically, you know, what we have here with the traffic configuration that we have, the lanes on the main driveways are gonna be 2 lanes, you know, in each direction. So that if we would have the situation that would be necessary to close one of the driveways, we can, on an emergency basis, make the other driveway a 2-way operation. When
I
we
didn't
get
see
out
that
on the,
in the diagram. Can you show me in the diagram how that would work?
Yeah.
I
Can
just
you-
don't see it.
get that back up.
Yep.
That was one of the questions that CKS and Andrus had initially, you know, about, they were concerned about the 2-way traffic on those driveways. They were wide enough that you could see,
Wrong one.
we're wondering how we would stack the buses in there with, if it was 1 lane. But, you know, we have those being, I think we're 24-foot wide. So they're wide enough that they can handle traffic in both directions. We need to get emergency traffic control in there. The industrial drive is wide enough. I think that's 38 or 40-foot wide, so that's wide enough for 3 ways in there. So that could handle, you know, traffic, and, you know, you can close a lane and still have a operation.
Did you consider other design layouts, or, I mean, are you held on this, or is it?
These are the driveways that exist out there. This is what was decided at the time that Lehigh Valley South Industrial Park was proposed and approved by the township. We have not, at this point in time, looked at other layouts of the site, but this seemed to work fairly well with what was being proposed. So this is why we came up with this arrangement. It is something that we can talk about further as we move forward with this design. We do have, one of the things that did come up in the review letters that we're gonna have to talk to the fire department about is how are we gonna get fire access in and how we're gonna get fire access around the building.
And so from my understanding, that assessment is separate from this traffic assessment.
That the fire and health and safety access is separate from the traffic impact stuff.
And when will that be done?
That'll be done as part of the land development also. We'll probably set up a meeting with the fire marshal and the staff to be able to go through that.
Will we have all that together when we do come back?
That'll be part of the land development plan.
Oh,
approval.
separate. Okay.
Yeah, which will come back to you.
Yeah. Yeah, we're looking at, we want to talk, you know, part of this, some of the stuff that we want to talk about, and this is something that we want to maybe talk about, maybe if this would make sense to move the building closer to Albertus Road so that they can reach it from the aerial. We want to put fire lanes around sides of the building, you know, things like that, that we should get together with David.
I agree.
Yeah.
And those would all be good, post conditional use hearing and potential approval and prior to a land development submission.
Agree. Any other comments? Any other comments from the public? I don't think we have any action here tonight, except
I was
for,
holding my breath still for a minute.
yes. But it sounds like all of you will be getting together for a formal meeting to figure out some of the information that still needs to be concluded, and maybe we'll see you back soon.
If we need to do it via Zoom, we can make it happen via Zoom as well. In person would be preferable, but
When- If they can get, you guys are gonna be in town anytime this week or beginning of next week.
We'll come by your hospital.
Yeah.
We'll figure that out.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thanks.
All right. next
Okay.
item. Go on.
next one is,
Yep.
1500 Trexler Town.
Yes, Western Lehigh Services. If all of you will come forward.
So
Yeah, and if you can all just introduce yourself. And then Nate, you'll give us a little overview first.
yep,
Jake Longenbach, Western Lehigh Services Vice President.
Bill Erdman, Keystone Consulting Engineers.
Julie Wagner Burkhart. I'm Land Use Counsel and I'm with Stevens and Lee.
all right. So as I just get this up on the share screen for our viewers at home, we received outreach from Western Lehigh several months ago with respect to property that had been purchased off of Trexler Town Road. It's an old, known as a Mayo property, one of the properties, of the Mayo Family Trust, I believe. And previously, there was a proposal for an assisted living facility at the site years ago. The applicants noted to us that they'd like to come in and basically move all their facilities here to the site on Trexler Town Road. We had an initial meeting that I think went very well. They've noted to us that they're essentially looking to do exactly what they do at their other site in terms of having their main office slash meeting rooms, a small nursery for display, storage of their vehicles, care of their vehicles, storage of materials. And quite frankly, I'll say with a pretty strong degree of certainty, staff feels that this is a pretty good uses of the site. We did identify a couple of items, and we're glad to see in terms of the application, several of those items were already addressed. One of them is correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the applicants are interested in still farming a good portion of the land. And that is, something that we obviously always support on our end. As everyone knows, we have an aggressive land preservation program here in the township for agricultural and open space. So we're looking to continue, ensuring that agriculture is a part of the community. Second, we noted that all along the creek here are a number of historic structures, some dating back to like 1799, early 1800s. This is the original Trexler town. There is a historic farmstead on this site. Some of the structures are not, in air quotes, historic. They wouldn't qualify for the register. But some of the ones that are there are original. We would like to encourage the preservation of those structures. It's important to our regional heritage. There are a number of these structures that go up and down the creek and straddle the township lines between Upper and Lower Macungie Township. So it is something that we want to make sure is discussed and handled moving forward with any future development. The third item that we did discuss, and it does appear to be shown here on the plan, but we do want to work with the applicant and the township engineer moving forward. Obviously, a good portion of this site being close to the creek is in the floodplain, ensuring that salt and topsoil and mulch are very far away, not just right outside of the floodplain, but adequately spaced out of any potential flooding area is essential. Clearly, any salt into the creek could cause a major issue, just like any mulch into the creek could cause a major issue during a flooding event. So we want to make sure that those facilities are placed as far away as possible from any high water marks that might come up during not just the 100-year storm, not just the 500-year storm, but the major hurricane remnants that we seem to get every couple of years that are pretty substantial and impacting on the community. So those were the major issues that we discussed. I did speak at length with the township zoning officer. He did just want to make sure everybody is aware that we do have a mobile home community right next door to this. So ensuring that there's adequate buffering and that there's no light impact, that the hours of operation do not impact their quality of life is key. And the same goes for those who are across Trexler Town Road, past the church. There is also another subdivision of single-family homes where it's the same sort of situation, early hour operations, buffering, so on and so forth. I'll note that the applicants did show in their conditional use plan that they do plan to buffer. We would encourage them actually for the nursery and the office to, have good street presence actually. So don't hide behind those trees. But as far as buffering the business end, and buffering the mobile home community, obviously a berm, evergreen trees, one of our class B or C buffers would best suit that to make sure that that's not an issue. And beyond that, those are the extent of my comments. I would really hand it over to Brian for anything else. But, again, we've had good discussions with the applicants. They have noted that they understand that those are our initial concerns that we would expect to come up during any conditional use hearing. But obviously there's going to be some technical items, and this will be something that goes to land development too. So that'll be another round of review. But with that, I would hand it over to Brian to bring up any further technical comments.
All right, thank you, Nate. Yeah, so to kind of lead off of what Nate had already discussed, floodplain, and it came up previously with another applicant. It's obviously something we're always very concerned about and looking at closely. There are some minor discrepancies with this floodplain versus what was shown on the FEMA map. So trying to understand what some of those changes were and why. As Nate had also mentioned, buffering on the adjacent property is certainly important to us. And then something that kind of could help us tonight is just really clarifying the intent of the property. What you plan on using this property for. I think Nate had mentioned lighting. This property is going to be used for retail overnight, or is this, I understand maybe it's more of a construction. So really, if you could help explain what the use is, I think that we'd appreciate it also if the application really clarified that as well with notice of intent, explaining what you're going to use the property for, and that way kind of gives us more insight as to, said, lighting and those kind of things, if they're required, parking, what's required for that, kind of understanding what's necessary for the site.
Nathan, do you by any chance have the renderings available to show?
I'm going to put them up right now. Yep.
That second link that was a part of that email goes to still images because the video is rather long. But the still images we can kind of click through, and Jacob can then take you kind of page by page and hopefully address some of those remarks. And kind of talk about how it's going to be situated, how he operates his business, and where all of the facilities will be located.
The other question I would ask, Nathan, a supplemental narrative was provided after the application. Did you see that, Brian? It was a much longer narrative, but I think that gave a fairly thorough.
It's in our cloud link. So
it is, okay.
Cloud link's available to everybody.
Okay.
All right, so I'm on the Google Drive and here you go. So it looks like this is from view from Trexler Town North, looking southwest.
Yeah, going south on Old Route 100.
Jacob, before you kind of get into the nuts and bolts of the actual rendering that you see, just give them an overview of your type of operation.
Okay, so the company was founded by my father back in 1990. The company started as a residential design build company, very, very small up until 2015 when I got out of college and came back and started working with him and started working in the business and growing the business and diversifying the company into other streams of revenue and year-round work. We were struggling to keep our guys busy through the winter because mostly our work was a seasonal business with being residential build, high-end outdoor living space type of work. So at that time in 2015, that's when we started doing full service commercial snow removal. We started a small little trucking division to allow us to have some more help and versatility for moving materials and stuff in the wintertime. And then that was our main hub of our business up until this spring, when we took over the Faust hauling operation. And the operation for Faust that we took over when the previous owners retired was their topsoil and stone business. And that was a very high sought after operation that a lot of people went to. I know Lower Macungie is one of our customers. We service a lot of the cities, the towns, the municipalities, contractors in the area. And then it helped us facilitate our own needs. It's not a retail operation, it's more of a wholesale. So I know there was some comments on some traffic stuff there, and the proposed numbers in those comments are definitely not the amount of traffic that we see throughout the day as far as that operation goes. And we've added some other things along the way that help facilitate our snow plowing operation. We are a dealer for an attachment company called Metal Plus. They build plows and they have a very high-end cutting edge technology that contours to the blacktop, and it allows us to be a lot more efficient. We can plow a lot more acreage of blacktop with these units. And since it's a live edge technology on the moldboard, it contours to the blacktop, and our salt reduction and savings that we see by using these plows is like 40 to 50%. So they're a Canadian-based company. They're starting to make a huge push in the US because of their efficiency and the salt usage that we can save, and we're not spreading those chlorides on the lots that we're servicing. So a lot of guys are migrating towards using them. We started as back in 15, I think when I came back, we started as like 7 to 9 employees. And now we're up around like 35 people roughly. So we're growing at a good rate, and our current operation that we work out of is just too small anymore. And when this opportunity presented itself, we thought that this would be a very good location for us to still be close to most of our work, and especially our plowing work, because a lot of the plowing we do, we're off in Industrial Boulevard in Upper Macungie. We service a lot of the buildings in that surrounding area, right in that industrial park there. So it's very vital to our operation that we're close to our work in the wintertime months, because it allows us to be efficient and utilize our time in a timely manner during winter events. So we didn't want to get too far away. So this looked like this was suited for us to be a really good opportunity. Our trucking division currently runs out of an operation in New Tripoli. And I wanted to get everything under one roof. So we were operating efficiently, and it would just allow the company to be more fluent and efficient and allow our employees to have growth within the company. And we weren't operating under multiple roofs and different locations. Our hours of operation, mainly in our construction business, are 7 to 5. Obviously during the winter, we are operating on the winter storms and how they come in. You know, it might be some night times. We still plan on keeping our old location and utilizing that for the winter time as well, because we have a salt bin there. So we'll have some salt storage here, but we won't necessarily be coming to this location all the time for salt. So traffic, even during a winter event, will be very minimal. Our trucks we facilitate. Our trucking is a local operation that is supporting a company that does all the barrier and concrete barrier and traffic controls for construction and road work, state roads, turnpike. We do a lot of turnpike work, local work. So the hours of their operation fluctuate depending on the job and the location we're working at. Some shifts are night, some shifts are AM work. We put them, when you would come in the driveway, we put them on that building in the left there, because we felt that that was the best location to put the most traffic that was going to be coming in and out as far as trucks go. And it would be the farthest away from all of our neighbors as far as noise would go. As far as questions about lighting, since most of our operation is during the day, we really don't plan on having that much lighting there. We don't need to have a lit up parking lot. In the back corner where the hoop buildings would be that keep our topsoil material dry, the stone bins, the topsoil pile. I mean, that really doesn't need any lighting at all. Where the salt bin would go, there might be one light there on a motion detector. So if someone's there in the middle of the night getting salt, we could, see. Currently, we set up a light plant when we're in winter storm operations because we don't have any lights at our facility now.
And so just to be clear, to help the planning commission out and those in the audience, this would be a facility that would purely be for your employees' use. This would not be similar to another facility we have in the township where if someone wanted to come up and buy topsoil or mulch from you or river rock, we don't have to worry about them coming in asking if they can purchase some. I think I already know the answer to that, but I think it's helpful for everybody else to know that as well publicly.
Yeah, so this would be wholesale. This would be for wholesale use. So if you're familiar with the Faust operation, that it would be, we would be continuing that operation here. So it would facilitate our needs and other municipalities' needs if they need a load of topsoil, contractors' needs. I mean, if a resident wanted to come in and buy material, I'm not going to turn them away, but it's not a resale operation where you have hundreds of people coming in and out.
Any more that you wanted to add? It was very informative.
No, I'm good.
Nathan, yeah, would you flip through some of the renderings just so that we can get a full picture? Because there's quite a lot of detail throughout these renderings that hopefully will show the full picture a little bit better.
As you're going through those, I did have a question about, so the retail side, so it sounds like that's not your intent, but it could occur.
We plan on keeping the Faust operation going as it currently is.
I guess when I say retail, I mean, meaning like, hey, kind of like an AB Stone type business where that's really all they do. I mean, they do wholesale stuff, but I mean, they do, you want to.
Yeah, correct. It would be
trailer-
mostly like wholesale operation, and that's like not our main business.
Right. Okay. But if a local neighbor wanted to come and get a scoop of topsoil, you would honor it. I mean,
He
you
could
do-
during our business hours.
Yeah. Okay. And then the plow side of the business, it sounds like you're selling those, so you would be fitting them there as well.
Correct.
And so is that also, I know that plowing is the type of thing that when it's happening and plows break, so at 3 a.m, someone comes in, is there going to be a guy fixing hydraulics and stuff like that? Or
I mean, we have during plowing operations, we have 2 to 3 mechanics on site, on staff, I should say. They're out plowing, and then if something breaks, they'll facilitate that breakdown. But if a plow goes down, that would be more of like a road call.
okay, so it's not going to be like a hub. Hey, this is the plow doctor.
No.
Figure it out. Okay. Yeah.
No.
Okay. I mean, I know those places exist.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. If your plow breaks down in the middle of the night, you need it fixed. You'll drive for that.
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly.
So one thing that I think also would be helpful, my understanding is with the prior site, with the prior development, one thing that came up, which I would imagine would come up again, is we're prepared to talk about, not necessarily during the conditional use phase, but when we get to land development, the importance of the stormwater management and design of the site. Our understanding is stormwater facilities in this general area are minimal. We're right next to the creek. There's a lot of abutting communities and properties. So when we get to the actual engineer design phase, one thing that I would highly encourage everyone to do is prior to submission of a land development plan to the township, we should all sit down, go over everything with the township engineer to help guide any potential designs, or at least hear what you're saying or what you're proposing. That way we can move the land development phase more quickly. Again, as you saw earlier this evening, just proximity to the floodplain, especially given the history of the site and a previously approved land development. We want to make sure that some of those previous points are discussed, especially since my understanding is DEP standards and township standards have gotten a little bit more regulatory since that time as well. So that would be helpful for you. We also heard that at one point in time, trails along the creek, as everybody knows, we got the Greenway in the township. So an easement for a potential future trail along the frontage of the creek would probably be helpful for us. That is something that we're trying to achieve, similar to say like the DNL trail or down by the Parkway. We do have an entire complement of trails along the creek right now, and we're more or less going east to west at this point. So this would be a key western point. So an easement for that in the future would be helpful. Not asking you to build a trail, just have that there as an easement in the future so the public could walk along the creek and go fishing if they wanted to. Those are comments that we received from a resident who was unable to attend tonight, but I wanted to make sure I got it on the record.
And I would add to that, Nathan, that we also have discussion on the FEMA limits. We realize, and I can answer your question, the FEMA limits that are on the plan were taken from the previously approved conditional approved plan. We obviously didn't get into the detail analysis for a conditional use. We recognize we need to identify that, so we'll have to dig a little deeper on that. But my thought was to get together to make sure that you're comfortable with storm drainage, at least conceptually, before we meet with the Conservation District to move it to the next level, and also make sure you're comfortable with the FEMA determination we come up with.
Yeah, the other comments that we received in the review letters, and we did, receive the October 4th, 2023 review summary that Nathan Jones provided, as well as the September 29th, 2023 CKS Engineers Review Letter, and the September 15th, 2023 Heinrich and Klein Associates Review Letter. The majority of the comments contained in the engineer review letters were pointed toward the land development plan, and we feel we'll be able to adequately address everything. And, as we've sort of presented in this concept plan, there don't appear to be any hurdles in meeting the objectives of the conditional use criteria either. So we are here tonight to hopefully receive a recommendation for conditional use approval so we can move on and go to the official full hearing phase.
I mean, I believe there's still outstanding pieces. We don't even have all the information.
Not everything yet. We did have a couple more questions that we just wanted to go over. I think frankly, we would be ready for a recommendation, certainly by the next meeting. Yeah.
What additional information is it that we need specifically, just so I can be sure?
Yep, I think, Brian, did you have a couple of questions? We wanted to formulate any potential conditions based off of stormwater, first and foremost. And then there were a couple of other items that came up where we did have some comment come in from the public today that we need to digest. They couldn't be here, but again, those being a few of the items that we discussed, we need to take that and potentially parlay that into a condition or discussion point. And I'd be happy to share it too. Those were the points I brought up regarding the stormwater design, the trails, and a couple of other aspects of the previous design of the site, and how that would factor into this new design.
So the thinking would be we'd have preliminary conditions in draft form prior to the meeting to.
We always aim to do that too.
We would
don't
look
want
at
to,
'em, yeah.
we want to be able to, after we've had the discussion with the applicant and put together preliminary conditions, share them so that there's a discussion point. So they're not being shared the first night without anybody seeing them.
Okay, so procedurally, the next step would be we have a sidebar meeting to go over with staff then what those conditions might be.
We'll circulate them well in advance.
And then we would have to come back before the planning commission to receive a recommendation before proceeding to the board.
Correct.
So the reviews that we received to date don't encompass everything.
There was some new testimony that was provided to us from a member of the public just today. So again, I'll circulate that. But it was comments that we would have received here in the meeting today. So it was unaccounted for when we did our initial reviews.
Since you have those comments, could we get those right away while you're putting the conditions together?
Absolutely.
Because we have no idea what that.
We'll circulate them because they were asked to be circulated to the board. We'll circulate them to the applicants as well. It's essentially what this member of the public would have said in a public meeting. So it was something that we would have had to have taken into consideration.
Okay, yeah, if we
Yep.
could get a copy of that, that would be great.
Yep.
Thank you.
So from a timings perspective, so the applicant is on hold for a temporary driveway permit that it was hopefully going to be issued by your zoning officer contingent on receipt of a conditional use approval. And now we're entering into the winter months. So do you have any estimate of how the timeline would run?
If a recommendation is received from the planning commission at the November meeting, then a hearing would be held in the early part of December. And I can confer with the township zoning officer on the situation with both the permit and the use for the site to see if he has any questions or concerns about it.
Our understanding, it was the PennDOT issue was the only concern, but if there's others.
It
let us
was, it wasn't
know. And
local.
we've made that application. The only thing I can't say is anybody that's dealt with PennDOT knows that every time you send in, there's a 30-day turnaround.
Mhm.
So we're hoping we don't get into multiple turnarounds on a temporary driveway, but we just don't know at this point.
Any comments from the board? Questions? That's all we've got. Thanks.
Thank you.
All right. Next item is the 1740 Spring Creek Road Barn Apartment Conversion Conditional Use. You'll come forward, please. Is that your representation as well? Is that? Okay. So, yeah, if you can introduce yourself, are you the only one that's going to be sitting up? Okay. Sure.
Okay. So once again, I'm Julie Wagner Burkhart, and I'm here with the representative applicant for 1740 Spring Creek Road. What he has proposed is a conversion of an existing barn. We did receive a correspondence dated October 5th, 2023 from Nathan Jones. And I'm not sure if he has any comments for us, but
Sure. My name is Greg Hart. I'm the property owner, and that's my wife, Susan. And like I said, Julie said that we're asking for a conditional use of our barn.
So I think a little bit of background information that would be incredibly helpful here for the planning commission is there's already an accessory dwelling unit that is attached to this barn. The way our zoning ordinance is written is that anything beyond one becomes and up to four becomes an apartment structure. The applicant has told us that essentially they're looking to put more accessory dwelling units into their family, I would say farmstead.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah. In order to do that, they have to go under the barn conversion for up to 4 apartments provision of our zoning ordinance, because we don't allow more than one accessory dwelling unit on a property. So while the application says apartments, our understanding is this is to expand the family farmstead, get in more accessory dwelling units. We have reviewed, and we did speak with Mr. Hart at length about this. One, as everybody knows, when we rewrote the ordinance in 19, the adaptive reuse of barns is incredibly important to the township and to the board. So anytime someone's coming in to actually save a barn and reuse it as opposed to knock it down, that's why we wrote this ordinance. They already have been saving this barn. They take great care in it. If you drive by, you'll see. Obviously, we would expect that to continue with the interior renovations that they're proposing. So we just initially spoke about the need for making sure that there's enough parking, making sure that they don't create a lighting nuisance or whatnot. A couple of items did come up during our review of the ordinances. So we just want to be clear, because this is a conditional use and it does unlock a couple of things. One would be obviously if there's going to be any site frontage improvements in the way of like a path or something along those lines in the right of way. The reason why we bring that up is because we have another proposed development up the street where they're going to be doing it, and it tends to be in our ordinance. It would be up to the planning commission as to whether you would recommend that to be installed, waived, or deferred. but because it's so close to our greenway and the trails, it's an item that is in our ordinance. So that's going to be a discussion point that you need to figure out. The same would be for instance, street trees and whether you want to consider that. However, there's a lot of old growth trees on this property anyway already. So adding more to it could be, you know, a question about how you want to handle things. We do also have, for our ordinance, anytime new dwelling units are created, we have a recreation fee. So that would be something that you would need to talk about and the board would need to talk about whether they want to handle that. Because while we recognize that these are essentially accessory dwelling units, they're still new dwelling units. So just a strict interpretation of the ordinance would call for the rec fee that we have, which is $3,800 per unit. Now, if it's an accessory dwelling unit, that's something that you might want to discuss with the applicant as opposed to it being an apartment for rent, but it's something to consider. So those are just a few things that we saw both in our initial review and then in a further review in preparation for tonight. We obviously support this application. We want to help the Harts move along and be able to do what they're trying to do and set an example for other barn owners in the township. So they hopefully do the same thing. But those are the extent of the comments that I have. And I do want to hand it over to, well, actually, we did note to the township engineer, because this is an adaptive reuse of an existing structure for essentially residential purposes, there's no need for a full engineering review. So that's what I have for everybody this evening. I did supply everybody with some comments. We do have a potential recommendation that's available to you there in the back. I can hand it to you right now if you want, but we do think that there's the opportunity to move forward tonight.
It's the forward facing one.
And I'd note with that, we were recommending the deferral of the street trees because again, there's just so many old growth trees right in this area.
If you want to take a moment to read that.
Mm-mm.
As to the first item noted here, there was
No township engineer review letter and apologies. That's
okay.
boilerplate language we put into every recommendation.
So we will strike that. obviously. What is the planning commission's pleasure relative to the trail being installed on Spring Creek and Mill Creek Road frontage?
Anyone else want to start or else? I mean, I think it's very important. If you're familiar with the other pieces there of land that are surrounding it, the care facility, I believe, has a deferral currently for a trail. Is that correct?
They do.
They
Yes.
do. And as you're probably aware, the property just behind that is up for development right now. And that would be required to have a trail. And this would help connect that. That deferral would come off from the care facility. And then this would help connect that down to some of the greenway area that's located off of Indian Creek Road, or Spring Creek, sorry, not Indian Creek, Spring Creek. So I personally think it's very important.
No, I think you say it well.
You sure?
Do you have any specifics, like, on the Spring Creek Road side, the trail ends on the opposite side of my property? As far as you're saying through Lehigh, through the nursing home, there'd be trails coming from there in the back field?
You said you already have the trail on?
No,
No, that's on the residential, for the
Yeah.
residential subdivision. Yeah, for the residential subdivision, there were trails that were installed. They end at the property line. Challenge that we run up against is a mid-block crossing that would essentially go across there, which could be a health safety matter. Generally, you want to have a crosswalk at an intersection. So it would either be a full frontage improvement or a partial frontage improvement is what they're noting. Like I said before, our ordinance says frontage improvements. So normally it's sidewalk. Here we're recommending path. One, path is more conducive to the greenway and park setting we have. Second, it's actually more affordable for you as opposed to putting in a full sidewalk. So
Does the township have specs on that path? that
we
they-
do. Yep.
And who would locate where those paths should be?
That would come to a point where you might want to hire an engineer. Now, the difficult part is we're not obviously recording this plan because it's just a conditional use. But the work would occur within the right of way. So it would be within the right of way.
As you probably know, my house is quite close to.
And we take that into account with a lot of the properties where homes are close to the road with good reason.
Mhm.
We were provided with copies. I can actually pull up the aerial. I think that'll be more beneficial for everyone to see what we're talking about here.
While he's finding that, were there any other specific items in that list?
I'm
Okay.
sorry, I'm taking a quick
Take
look.
your
And I do apologize. We actually, following some discussion internally, we completed them this afternoon.
Oh, that's great. I just want to make sure I understand them all.
Okay. Number 5, the barn shall maintain improved attention, historical aesthetic.
You already do.
Yeah,
So,
Although-
and we like that.
Your building is beautiful.
Your building is beautiful.
Yeah.
And we really appreciate everything you do. Where we were just putting that in with the hope that you don't completely remodel it
Oh,
and
no,
take away from
no.
its historic integrity.
He was only intending to add a few windows because
That's-
with the addition of the units.
Fine.
On number 8, I'm actually working with Brian's firm for engineering drawings for the sewer and the application.
Okay, so what's your intent there to proceed forward with? All right, you're gonna connect?
Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
great.
The barn is already connected.
So it would be the additional EDUs for the new,
Correct.
perfect.
Well, I am still going to do another tie-in. It's just that where the current tie-in is, that it's not in a good location for apartment. The recreation kit. I see you show 4 apartments. I only need 1 now. Okay, and it's been communicated to me that I'm allowed 4, I should ask for. Like I said, I'm only gonna do 1 apartment in my life. Do I need to pay a $3,800 fee for units that I don't have?
I think that would be something you want to talk to with the planning commission about how you would handle it. I would say when we go to record a plan for like a subdivision, when those lots are created, we require that fee at the time of the recordation of the plan. However, in this case, it's just a conditional use. And then what they would do after that is come in and pull building permits for each new unit that they wish to build.
I was gonna suggest that perhaps as he pulls building permits, this would be the fee assessed.
So it sounds like we haven't experienced this prior. That you're saying that this is unique.
So in the past, we have had subdivisions where the rec fee is pulled with each building permit, which
Right.
has been incredibly challenging for staff to
Correct.
stay on top of, especially if you're building a 50 unit, or I'm sorry, a 50 lot subdivision or a 100 lot subdivision. In this case, we're talking about 4 potential units. So the township practices with recorded plans, we require everything up front. If
Mhm.
this is a conditional use where they're only coming in with one, it is new ground for us.
Go on.
As far as the sewer allocation, from my understanding, they said that I would only have to pay for my allocation for the one apartment, not the 4. But
You're
to
saying
make
'cause it's-
future plans,
So one connection
correct?
versus having with the potential for 3 additional
Correct.
connections. So your question is, are you
I'm
paying for
thinking
all
of
4 of
the
those?
same line as for the,
Right, so you're asking, are you paying just 1 now or 4? Is that,
well, I was told that I'm just paying 1 sewer connection
Mhm.
with the engineering forethought of an additional 3 apartments whenever. if
right,
ever.
right. I
And I'm asking for that kind of same exception for the
Yeah, so when he goes to,
recreation fee.
when he
Keep-
goes to pull the building permit, he would have to do the tapping fee as well as the
Right,
recreation. fee.
basically keeping everything in line, so
Right.
as a new one comes, a new tapping fee and a
Right.
new recreation fee. I mean, the only thing, and Nate, you can enlighten us on this, I mean, that, I do understand the challenge of when things are done out of the norm, out of the order that's usually done. This is a little bit unique, in that there is not an intent from yourself stating that you have no intent to build it.
No.
You simply want to have the ability to have maybe another generation do it, or.
Correct. And you, as the planning commission, you need to think of that forethought, but I have no intention.
Mhm.
I hope to pass this property to my daughter,
Mhm.
and what she does with it in the next 50 years, that's on her.
Right. Sure.
But knowing, I mean, a fee like this for the sewer and the recreation, that could break my budget.
Yeah, for your,
So I
for
would
your intents, I
almost ask-
understand your concern.
I would almost ask for 1 apartment instead of 4 at
Mm-hmm.
this point.
Got it. Any other
Nathan?
members have comments?
Can you just explain what the recreation fee is?
Yeah, sure. So for those watching at home and for members of the audience, so the township has an ordinance in place for dedication of open space or recreation fee in lieu of, and the township actually has the ability to choose in terms of projects, which the preference is. As the township's moving forward right now with some strong capital projects for our park system and whatnot, the standard has been the fee, and it's generally easier for applicants to go that route as well. It's $3,800 per new dwelling unit. That fund goes into recreation fee that helps us upgrade our swing sets and play sets at our parks. It helps us refurb trails. It helps us take care of pavilions. They're essentially, for every new residential dwelling unit, we have new residents who are going to use our recreational facilities in the township, our playgrounds, our sports fields, our trails. And those funds go towards maintenance and capital improvements of those facilities for all the new residents to, be able to enjoy. So that's how we help fund those necessary items.
And those fees, though, are generally imposed on land developments, not necessarily what we're talking about here.
Well,
I mean-
the challenge is for this conditional use, it's coming in as an apartment, which is a new dwelling unit. Unfortunately, because you're only allowed to have 1 accessory residential family dwelling unit per lot, it was the way that we could get it in so that you get the number of units that you're looking for. The site already has 1 accessory residential dwelling unit on it. So we are looking at the apartment situation, which does create the fact that the ordinance requires per new dwelling units a recreation fee. You can request a deferral of that fee, you can request a waiver of that fee, but as we've been saying all night here, our job is to make sure that everybody gets treated the same.
Understood. But it's a unique situation as we've so I'm thinking this through as we talk. And his intention is, of course, not to it's staying within the family. He's not even,
Yeah.
there's no commercial gain here for him. You know, typically, that's one of the justifications for imposing fees on land developers, because they're either selling or renting units, and it's an enterprise. This is not a financial enterprise for him. So, you know, there is the condition within the prepared condition approval letter that he notify if, you know, he is intending to or does in fact rent the unit, which I'm assuming that the township has some sort of change in use certificate that's required in that event, or some rental application, leasing application. Perhaps the right mechanism for imposing these fees would be, at the time that he makes this into a commercial enterprise, he pay the fees that you're requesting now for recreation and for, well, the sewage tapping would occur when he taps, you know, when he has to actually take the capacity, but regardless of whether or not there's a commercial enterprise. But with respect to I mean, a $3,800 recreation fee for something that's not a commercial enterprise is, I don't think, the spirit of the ordinance.
I disagree. I don't think that it's strictly for commercial. Yes, it's much easier to impose that because you can say, look at all this money that's going to be flowing in that direction. But I mean, the parks get used. If you're familiar with municipal budgets, they're always a losing endeavor. They're very important. I mean, they're incredibly important to the enjoyment of living in a place, and that's the kind of utility of them. But they're losing, and this is what makes them so that everyone can enjoy them. And if there's going to be an additional person in that dwelling, which there will be, that's what that fee is for. I mean, I understand where you're going with the commercial, because that is where the conversation happens most frequently. But I disagree in what its intent and what its end result benefit is to the township.
Well, to the extent then that it's the 4 units in total aren't going to be occupied, I would suggest that it be
Yes.
related back to the occupancy.
I think that is something that, I mean, is in this case unique and is probably where it should end up. But if anyone else wants to kind of expand on that, or we can make an adjustment to this now. Anyone?
Nate, I hate to ask you this, but why were the 4 units proposed again?
So I wasn't directly
Dumbing it
involved,
down.
but my understanding with the 4 units is you're allowed to have up to 4 units.
this way
So
you wouldn't have to keep coming back.
you wouldn't,
You'd
if,
want
if,
to add, then
correct,
now you're going to be imposed with this. Okay, that's what I needed to
right.
wrap my
You
brain
know,
around a little bit.
yeah, his application did cite to 2 different provisions in the ordinance that that actually specifically say up to 4 units.
Mhm.
And since it's a large barn, so he could fully get 4 units there. And since this is a conditional use application, you know, like you said, he wouldn't have to keep coming back.
Right.
But specifically, there's the heritage preservation and historic structure protection that speaks directly to adaptive reuse of an existing barn. And one of the conditional uses that it lists is a multi-unit dwelling not to exceed 4 units. That's one of the 2. The other is within the open space neighborhood development provisions of your ordinance. And that again refers to the conversion of a barn to no greater than 4 units.
And the
Excuse me.
reason for that is if a developer were to purchase a farmstead, we were trying to provide some incentive, instead of tearing down the barn to build new residential dwelling units, for them to adaptively reuse that and factor that into new dwellings being built.
Can I ask an additional question? So I understand the reason for asking 4, always ask for the maximum, makes the most sense. It's more efficient. This would carry if you decided to sell the property, correct? It would carry on to the next. owner.
Correct. The conditional use goes with the property.
And I understand that's not your intent, but that is how we should look at all properties,
Mhm.
because there are many things that
It's
probably
been
were
there-
never
it's
intended,
been
you
there
know,
250 years.
right.
So
Oh, no, that I get, but there were also farms that the farmer said, I'm never gonna sell this, and now they have 700 homes on them. You know, I mean,
Yep.
things do change over time. So I think that's a part to look for. I mean, what I'm hearing, no one seems to be objecting on the idea that this is a 1-for-1. So when there's a sewer tapping that's done, that's when you're paying the fee. and that would line up with when you're paying that recreation fee. Am I correct in
Yeah.
hearing that?
I have no objection.
Each
Yeah.
per unit. You'll be paying per unit. So if you expand beyond the one initial unit into the additional four, you'll pay as you go.
That's fine.
Yeah,
That's
and
what-
you're getting
that-
the,
That makes sense to me.
you're getting, I know your intent is not to sell, but someday you will, or maybe you won't, and maybe it'll go to your daughter, but I just
You know?
putting that out there. But if you,
Great,
if
the
you
great
don't-
grandchildren?
If you don't, I can imagine that the property value goes up by having that. So, I mean, you're by having the ability to turn that into 4 units. So, definitely I would be opposed to waiving the initial, recreation fee, but I think lining it up so that it would go one at a time as each one of those apartments would become an actual apartment is a fair shake here. And it is unique. Maybe we're setting a new precedent for something, but it's different than what seems to have happened anywhere else in the township. So, that still didn't answer the tree question, which is out there about, there are a number of well-established trees on the property. And offering a deferral for,
Those 2 new trees
Yeah,
there,
we have
they're
new-
literally on the property.
That's one of the reasons why I came in here. I just,
Okay.
know we have some new trees that have been put in. We have the old growth trees.
Yeah.
This is a well manicured and well landscaped property. So
yeah,
for us to note the street tree situation, I mean, you can get up here onto the Spring Creek side and note that there's some, gaps in terms of landscape coverage. But again, you have these large old growth trees
And-
that are on site. So
and I mentioned this in a previous conversation, is that also, I mean, that is at one time, that was a free-flowing street before the stop signs were there. And I mean, it's still, not that people shouldn't still be stopping, but just if there's too many trees in that area, maybe the lines of sight would be obscured. So I'm fine with the deferral.
Actually, I did cut down a tree years ago because the school district asked me there was a spruce tree there on the corner.
Okay,
And they asked me to cut it down because they couldn't see down the lane to go straight.
got it. Sure, okay, yeah. So street trees, we're fine with deferring. Okay. Were there any other items in that drew concern? The trail, I know you brought that up. I offered my opinion. I don't know if anyone else has opinions on the benefit of that trail.
We're just specific where.
The
Is-
location, I mean,
it would be put into the right of way. So
And-
we have right of way here along the street. That is where the trails would go.
So, and the material typically, can you just give them an idea what the spec materials
It'll be
generally
a
are?
bituminous asphalt.
Okay.
I don't know if this means anything, but when I did subdivide 20 years ago from the nursing, and I got call it something where they said I didn't
Deferral.
defer
Yep.
on because I have such a large property and a corner property that it would be very costly to do what you're mentioning on that whole length.
So you already have, as part of the subdivision, you already have the requirement for the trail in as part of your original subdivision.
I have a deferral.
because it was deferred, but it's
Yeah.
part of the plan, is what you're suggesting.
Well, initially they were saying I would have to do curbing and sidewalk on that, and that, that's 4 football.
Yeah, and we've moved, in some of our neighborhoods, we still require sidewalk, but in areas such as this, we've moved more towards a trail situation as opposed to the sidewalk. So
And I think that's more of the use. I mean, it's used more as a trail than a sidewalk, which is more everyday use. This is connecting to kind of the nature side of it. This is a more cost-effective way
Right.
for you.
And just to be honest, most of the people, a lot of people do use, if you pan around the other way, you're more to the right there, that sidewalk right there ends.
Yeah.
And people walk across the street.
I can
to
see the path of
corner.
where
yeah, we
they
can see the
walked.
foot.
Yeah, I mean, I
Yeah.
can see it's already there in
Yeah.
a sense.
It would almost, to be honest, make better sense to start it there, go and somehow cross the street with the bike path over
So
along the creek.
I understand in this current configuration, and I understand why you'd want to avoid having to do some of it. But the future, the care facilities above your property or to the north of your property, and then the Dan Weber property, which is currently in discussion for development, that offers a whole nother level of connectivity where there would be no need to cross that road. You know, you could probably come from, let's say, the Lorimer County Middle School and connect all the way down there, which would be a much safer way.
Been down that street.
Yes. I mean, that is the goal of all of this, is that it connects the trails that already exist or gets you to those trails in a safer way.
Right, and I'm not
Yeah.
opposed to that.
And I can sense that. I
I
understand
mean,
there's a
we
cost
have
factor.
people-
I
we have
recognize
people
that.
on a daily basis, on a weekly
Yeah.
basis, knock on our door and ask, and they take pictures of our house. And
Yeah.
just last week, we had someone from Portland, Oregon, walking down our sidewalk up through our house and up through the barn. She thought it was a park.
Oh.
Wow.
So, like I said,
Yeah.
I just have to, I only have a budget for this one apartment, and I have a
Understand.
huge, fee tied to before I even drive the first nail, and it's
Right.
becoming more than the apartment itself. So that's cost prohibitive.
We understand.
What is the expectation on when installation would
Right, that's what I was
occur?
gonna ask. What is our normal time frame is for completion?
Well, our normal time frame for completion would be tied generally to the developers' agreements and posting of security and completion and then release of that security. And generally, as far as a development goes, again, if you're dealing with a subdivision, it depends on when there's a notice of termination for the NPDS permit and whatnot. Again, we're talking about construction of a dwelling unit within an existing structure where there's no land development activity taking place. There's no need for developer agreements here. There's no public improvements that are going to be bonded right now. When the trail would go in, because it is within the right of way, we would need to draft those agreements and we would be talking about letter of credit. But again, that comes to whether you feel that it's
And so it would
prudent
be
for another
within our
deferral.
right to create a time frame. Also. Is that what you're?
We have done a number of projects where we have tied things to a time frame. Yes. Within 5 years, within 10 years, within 2 years.
When is the anticipated care facility installation occurring?
So that their deferral would be coming up. Basically, I mean, if this, I guess it would be, so for the care facility, which is already there, I know it's changed names, so that's why I'm just calling it the care facility. It's called currently, Complete Care at Lehigh Center. It's current, and then Genesis Rehab, but they have a deferral now, correct?
They do, and I would say that our expectation for a call-in and deferral would probably be in tandem with if and when there is approval of the Mill Creek Point Apartments property and when those trails are built. When those trails are built, and this is quite far up the road from you, Mr. Hart, but this property currently has a proposal for an apartment complex. There are ring trails and internal trails that are proposed. Some of these trails are frontage trails that would go down Spring Creek Road. When that point is done, the deferral would likely be called in for this facility here. And again, this is all, I should note the township is procuring a property along the creek for fishing access a little bit further up Spring Creek Road here. We've naturalized this area. Again, it's really to try and get people to this natural resource that is the Little Lehigh Creek. So
He's not doing any site improvements on this project. This is again, not a land development plan that he's submitted.
I mean, you made this great provision to restore these barns. Because they do take a lot of money and upkeep.
Yes.
And you made this great provision where I can utilize the barn again. It used to store hay, straw. It was the money maker of the property. And, through ordinance, you give them some hope for purpose for the barn. But all these other, I'm like into this $30,000 and I didn't even do anything yet.
I mean, and I say that with a smile. I've developed properties as well. I understand the challenges of that personally.
And I can't transfer that to the buyer if I was a developer or anything.
Right,
like that.
exactly. And I understand the difference there too, but I mean, it is the challenge of that. Once you start to make an exception, then that exception, for the multi-million-dollar project.
Mhm.
But this isn't a land development plan. So this is not, you're not making an exception for a land development plan.
It's
Um,
unique. I understand.
I mean,
It's,
your conditional use provisions in your ordinance don't list this as a requirement for a conditional use approval.
Is-
His consideration for this is, trying, simply trying to, be a good neighbor at this point.
Julie, do you have a problem with a deferral on the trail? A deferral.
Not a deferral, no.
So if it's going to be a condition, but it's going to be deferred until the township calls it, just like for the care center and potentially for the one.
At this point, though, as it's written, it's not written as a deferral.
No, I'm
So-
asking you if
Right.
we changed it to a deferral.
Oh, that would, I think, be,
It's not going to be waived.
Certainly,
in other
right,
words.
okay.
They want the trail eventually.
and then what is the trigger exactly?
The township calls the deferral. in. So it
Okay.
says you have to build this trail now. Like it's going to do for the care center at some point. So you wouldn't have to outlay the money now, but at some point down the road, you may have to install the trail.
And it sounds to me like there's already a deferral for sidewalk and curbing. So this would essentially overwrite that and make it a deferral for a trail, which is more affordable than sidewalk.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so that certainly would be preferable.
Yeah, absolutely.
Assuming the planning commission is okay with that too.
yes, no, again, that, not opposed to, I was trying to find a creative way to get a positive end result and work with a neighbor
We
who's trying to
appreciate
do
that.
something that's positive. And, if you, watched how things develop, that those properties, care facilities, it's at least 20 plus years, maybe more than that. And the Denver property's been talked about for even longer than that. So you're looking at a considerable amount of time, but I think we're getting closer. So know that you have this eventually. It's deferred for now, which would makes it easier to get through the project, but it
Is
would be
there-
coming down the line.
Is there an overall plan now of where they should be? You saying you have,
It's
Yeah.
just right, it would be in the right of way. I mean,
It
that would
would,
be
it
something
would
that-
be in the right of way.
So if that's
Okay.
a,
Which it's a fairly defined area to begin with.
right.
probably basically
I
where
mean, it
people
would
are.
be better to go across the street into the park where
You-
you want them to go
It has to be
versus
on
down
your,
along the side of my property.
it has to be on your property.
Yeah.
We can't
Well,
put it on
I-
someone else's.
Go on the Spring Creek side.
Yeah, but we don't have control over that.
Well, hold on, go left, go the other way. A little bit more. You turn it right up there along there on the left. A sidewalk coming down my property on the left, right there. Come down there, cross the road into the park. Versus around the bend of my property and down along the side of my house. It would make, because everybody that comes from that development and up that way crosses the street right where the stop sign. And then they go into the park where the park benches are.
So let me just throw this out there. This, I think when we first looked at this, we kind of thought this was going to be a very easy decision. But like all simple things, somehow that's just how it goes. And it's good. It means that we'll get to the correct end result.
Mhm.
Timing wise, there's some real thought that could come into this. Do we want to push this off to another meeting so we can maybe look at some of these things? That sounds like a negative too, that it might mean we come up with a different result, but you're probably on a timeline also, right?
Well, I would like to proceed with
The approval?
the approval
Yeah.
and then do with the deferment. That's-
Yeah, so
Yeah.
what
And then
would,
we'll cross that bridge or
I mean,
road when we
yeah.
get there.
Yeah, but yes, I understand, but we're specifically deferring the side, what you just proposed there isn't what we would just say deferral for your whole property.
For the
We wouldn't be
whole-
just talking about some of those.
Oh, okay.
But what
detail.
they also are noting is that you currently have a deferral for curbing and sidewalk, which this will replace. So this is still a better result for you at this stage. And at some time, you know, I mean, having a deferral protects the township because they're ultimately requesting of you what they would like to see every property owner do.
Right.
But that doesn't prevent us from continuing a conversation to maybe make the pathway more, you know, meaningful and connecting. You're protected, we get the approval, and we can continue the conversation still.
I like that.
As far as this document is concerned, I have it really pretty hacked up. Do you want to, should I take an attempt at reading it, or can we just sort of all generally agree and
Mr. Solicitor?
circulate something in writing, solicitor?
Typically what we do when we have to revise, we say, oh, sorry, Maury. Typically what we do when we have to revise these is say, subject to the revisions of the following. And then they move to approve it, and then we'll work on the language. And then before it goes to the board, we, in a letter form, we'll show it to you and see what
Wonderful.
it says. So we can do that. So the things that need to be revised, as I have seen, is number 3 on the trail, going out of number 3 and going to a deferral. Some language, the township engineer review letter issue, there's none. We would revise that, obviously. And then on the rec fee, revising that language to make it subject, payment upon of 3,800 at the time of a building permit issuance for each unit. Is that what we came to a conclusion?
And I don't know if it needs to be revised, or if it's the way it's already applied, but for number 11, with respect to the public water and sanitary sewer service, excuse me, the applicant would pay for any tapping or capacity fees at the time, again, of building permit.
Those are pay as you go anyhow, is that correct?
They are.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's.
That's how it
standard.
applies now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
I think that there was one revision to number 1. Just
Yeah, that was when I said the township engineer, there's no township engineer review letter, so we'll just take that out. Is there a zoning officer review letter?
It was worked into mine,
Both.
actually.
Okay.
Yep, we worked on it together, so.
That one stays.
okay.
So number 3 and number 13, subject to those revisions, you would be moving to approve, make a recommendation of approval, subject to the conditions as revised.
All right.
And where it says units, would it say units?
Which ones are you referring to?
So number 7, for the new units, for number 8, says units for.
I would say that they remain plural because if they proceed forward in the future, we want to make sure that those units can have mail delivery service. The reason why that condition is in there is because the USPS changes their rules for mail delivery, and we just want to make sure that the residents can get their mail there. So if we make it unit, then future residents might not have access. They might have to go get a PO box. We just want to make sure that they can get access to mail at their site.
Was there a deferral for the fee?
There was a deferral for the trees. And again, as we saw on the street view, again, I mean, there's a lot of old growth trees here and the applicant's already planted a couple. It's almost not necessary.
Any other comments from the board? Any comments from the public? Does someone want to make the updated motion? You can reference, if you remember, we attempted to change this in our last meeting, make it a little more efficient, so we don't read these in depth the whole time. We ended up basically reading them, going through it this time anyhow, so it was unique. But does someone want to make, you basically use the heading of it and then note the changes that were there?
So I move that we make a motion. Sure. I move that we make a motion to omit number 1.
Well,
What are we doing? We're going through.
do we want, well, I was gonna say.
You want me to do the motion? I can do the motion for you if
You
you
do the
want.
motion. Go
Okay,
ahead.
someone can so move. All right, so this would be, the planning commission is considering a motion to recommend approval of the 1740 Spring Creek Road Barn Apartment Conversion Conditional Use, subject to the conditions written in the written motion distributed tonight and read by the applicant and their counsel, and subject to the changes to paragraph 3 and paragraph 13 and any other necessary changes to the to number 1 to be performed after the meeting.
I second.
You make the motion.
You're making it, yeah. Is there a second?
I'll second.
We have a second. Discussion, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We will circulate the final letter for your review and approval, and you can expect to be scheduled for a hearing in November.
What was that?
Little note card.
Yes,
Has that
yes.
verbiage.
No,
Tape it right here.
It's so hard when we write.
Yeah.
yes, yeah.
That's the second time.
Yeah.
I've seen it. I'm sure.
All right. Our next item is 1111 Grange Road modification of plan. If you'll come on up.
So just to give the planning commission some background, and then the applicants will look forward to hearing their testimony before the planning commission this evening. The Bite Simca Ministry House was approved several years ago by the Board of Commissioners and has been under construction now for several years. And in fact, mostly throughout the length of COVID. And one thing that has come up during the construction phase has been several items that have required in-field modifications to the plan. Specifically, items that came up through the Lehigh County Conservation District. And that necessitated a CAP plan, corrective action plan. We've also worked with the applicants on items regarding landscaping at the site, specifically trees that have been available, conflicts with some of the utilities and the needs to modify the plantings. We did advise the applicants, however, when they asked about, this will be similar to the last item we discussed, the trail system that was proposed for the site, that they would need Board of Commissioners approval and Planning Commission recommendation to do what they were seeking. And that specifically is the width of their walkways. The width of their walkways are the recorded plan and approved plan by the Board of Commissioners is different than what they are proposing and what they've partially installed on site. So they're currently before the Planning Commission this evening to discuss the potential change in width of those walkways along Grange Road. Grange Road goes right out to Hamilton Boulevard, and then this will lead up to the Red Maple Acres mobile home community and eventually Air Products. The applicants also noted to us today, and I'll give them the opportunity to bring it up, but there were a couple of other site modifications that they did want to bring up to the Planning Commission, but we would be treating this as a modification of plan. The plan that we received from the applicants is the corrective action plan, which is the one that was essentially submitted to the Lehigh County Conservation District that has basically gone through their process. So we'd be looking at it through that lens as well. And with that, again, this is more of an administrative situation than it is a planning situation, considering the site's already currently under construction. But with that, I'd hand it off to Brian if he had any other further comments from an engineering perspective. Again, I'll tell you in all candor, the main reason we're here this evening is the walkways and the width of the walkways, because we can't do that by fiat. That needs to be approved by the Planning Commission and the board. We can do landscaping modifications at the staff level. This one we couldn't. So Rabbi Blank, who we've been working with closely, is here to explain that a little bit further with you this evening. Brian, if you have any comments, please let us know. But we're really talking about a waiver tonight and a couple of other plan modifications before the planning commission.
This is Robert Hops, our engineer for construction. And this is Nick Negrescu, who is a member of our construction committee, a member of our congregation leadership team.
Okay.
Okay, so we are seeking a waiver for the walkway for several reasons. So we had originally planned a macadam front walkway. Originally, there was a discussion at this commission many years ago.
If you could just put the microphone closer, it'll just make it a little easier to hear you.
Many years ago, I met with the planning commission, and the planning commission agreed to change the plan to a macadam walkway. And then our committee decided that we would prefer to do a concrete walkway because it will last longer. So we decided to upgrade it to concrete. After we began building it last spring, the township inspector told us that it needed to be 6 feet wide rather than 5 feet wide. So I appealed to Mr. Jones, pointing out that the 5 feet sidewalks, there are many 5 foot wide sidewalks nearby, both at Air Products, which is in another township, and at Home Depot, which is in this township behind us. Our approved plans, our engineer noted that our approved plans call for a 5 feet wide sidewalk leading from this front sidewalk into the parking lot. That was already part of the approved plans for a 5 foot wide sidewalk. We had to redesign the front of our lot to accommodate where PPL put power poles, because they wanted to have high power lines going down Grange Road to Air Products. So that the power lines, the power poles got moved. They also had to take down the trees. It was all, I made sure the township was aware of that, and they agreed to this change with replacement trees. And in a couple of places, there just isn't enough room for a 6 foot wide walkway. I can, if Nathan will bring up pictures, I brought some pictures to show that. Our front walk, also I note that our front walkway won't be able to connect with any other walkways on either side of our lot. That's also shown in the pictures. Because on the south side is Bender's Garage, and they have a paved entrance into their lot. So there won't be a walkway there. And on the other side, as shown in the pictures, our walkway will end in a protected area before we even get to the Red Maple lot. It just simply ends. So we can't go any further than that. So it's not going to be connecting with any other walkway. And therefore, it doesn't really matter how wide it is with respect to any other walkways. So then our engineer most recently looked at Lower Montgomery Township requirements for a concrete walkway. And this is where I'll let him speak, because I wasn't aware of this until yesterday.
All right. There's one other issue that we see that is sort of critical. There's a tree protection area that El Lehigh County District requires that we cannot encroach on. And by decreasing the width, we can satisfy the walkway being in a position that it will not affect any existing trees in that area.
Yeah, so there you see that on one end, it just ends at a protected area the Conservation District requires. So it's not going to go any further than that. So it's not going to connect to any other walkway. And then the other end, it ends at the entrance to the Grange, to the Bender's Garage. And when I originally talked to the planning commission, I did ask, why are we building this walkway? And the idea was it would connect with other walkways. It won't connect with any other walkways. There's a walkway down there, but that's not going to connect to ours. So for these reasons, we're simply, now we've already begun constructing this. There's a cost of reconstructing the base of a walkway. So last spring, we asked that we could just let us finish the walkway that we had already started.
How much of the walkway is currently?
What?
How much of the walkway is currently complete?
It's currently built to be 5 feet wide.
Oh, I understand that. You were saying that you're currently constructing it. I thought it was already installed.
Yeah, a site developer started constructing the walkway 5 feet wide. You can see the base is already built, and then the inspector came by and said that needs to be 6 feet wide.
So for clarification, that's the status that it's currently in?
That's currently 5 feet wide.
Right, but that is not a finished surface. There's no concrete there.
Oh, it's not finished.
There's no concrete. no
Right.
concrete.
Yeah, so we're just looking at the base is down.
That is correct.
Correct,
We stopped
Right.
because the inspector told us.
correct. Okay. Just making sure that I.
And that's why we
Yeah.
contacted Mr. Jones.
Yes, exactly. So the final top coat, the concrete has not been laid, just the base has been laid.
That's correct.
Okay.
We were starting to frame the concrete when the township inspector.
So it is
Came
framed
by.
as well? It's currently framed?
It's not framed. We stopped
Right,
and
okay,
removed the wood when the township inspector
Yes.
said, stop,
got it.
stopped.
Anyone have?
So what, am I hearing this correctly, that they're saying you need to have it 6 feet wide?
Correct. Well, the 6 feet wide is what the.
6 feet wide is what the
says.
specs and what the plan are for. Yep.
But you can only go 5. So you're looking
Right,
at-
because it was 6 feet wide for a macadam walkway.
They want to go different than what the ordinance says, with the plans.
And help us understand again why. Looks like there's space for it. Help us
Oh, well,
understand why it looks like there's space for the 6 feet.
Okay, why there isn't space?
There is
Ah.
space for it, it looks like.
Yes. Along the way are the power poles. Okay, those poles are coming up very, very close to that walkway. Okay.
I'm
Okay,
sorry.
so right next. Well, they're right next to the walkway, but so as to expand to 6 feet, you would have to actually cut around those poles.
Plus the added expense of a 390-foot total amount of space on the front. Adding an extra foot of concrete as well as stone. Stone is there now, 4 or 5 foot, and it misses the pole.
Can't go on the other side away from the pole.
On the other side, there's a slope, and in a couple, 2 or 3 places, the trees that were installed would be too close. We would endanger the trees. We also actually are supposed to put in, this is something I was discussing with Mr. Jones, last spring. There's supposed to be 92 red twig dogwoods in between the trees and the walkway. So that's also a tight fit. So we held off putting those in till we had clarity about the walkway. As soon as we have that, I want to get those red twig dogwoods in, and we're going to have to go around a couple of those trees.
So the
We're
challenge.
really fighting for space here.
Yeah, I mean, I understand that. And the challenge for me on this is that, you've already done some of the work, which I understand the concern and all that stuff. But if I looked at this at another property in the municipality, what really makes this different? And there isn't much that makes it different other than a request to make it smaller. I mean, if this is a property somewhere else, this isn't different. It's not completely unique. Even though I'm hearing your concerns that there's telephone poles, there's trees, those are faced other places in the municipality. Maury, it sounds like you've got a comment that you want to add here.
Okay. Normally, when a development comes in, we give them a alternative between a 5-foot wide concrete sidewalk and a 6-foot wide macadam path. In this case, it was decided that it would be a 6-foot macadam path. And normally the planning commission decides such things based on how the rest of the road and so forth is going to be. But so as far as I see it, the fundamental issue is, are you willing to accept a 5-foot concrete sidewalk in lieu of a 6-foot macadam path.
That's very good information and new to me. So the standard for the macadam is 6 foot, you're saying,
That's right.
but the concrete is 5.
5 feet for collector and above roads and 4 feet for, I mean, yeah, and 4
Yeah.
feet for
Okay.
smaller local roads.
Yeah, I will note that at that,
And-
at the planning commission meeting, I was given a choice. Now, I'm a rabbi. Okay, and my lawyer was with me, okay? And I've made a lot of wrong choices in my life. Okay? This was one of them.
So-
Because my committee informed me later, it should be concrete or last longer. It's a better, we really should make it concrete. The planning commission did not seem to be weighing in about one way or the other. It was a choice that I was given, and I said, I like black macadam. I think it looked nice. Okay. So that actually is how that decision got
So,
made.
I mean, this does help quite a bit. I didn't understand that the separation there of the two, of the size discrepancy. So am I understanding this correctly, that it's because you selected initially the 6 feet, which was going into macadam, but now you've built it at 5, you want to make it?
That's correct.
Nate, can you help me with any information is there something that I'm missing here?
No, I mean, that's really the extent of it.
So-
They're asking to go in at the 5 foot. You know, the only thing that I'd notice is for, like you brought up, continuity purposes, the record plan says 6 foot, the standard says 6 foot. They've done 5 feet and they'd like to go a foot less.
But I think I think if what Maury just mentioned there is that the standard is actually 5 feet. This would go against what their plan says, but not against what the township. Is that correct?
More or less.
Okay, and I mean, more or less, I'm just trying to make sure I'm not missing something.
It's a different material because we have 6-foot trails in other areas of the township, so.
Yeah, no, so when, as he just stated, when they approved this, it was a 6-foot macadam trail or path, correct? Since they selected that, they're wedded to that. Right?
Unless you all decide to change your mind here.
Right,
tonight.
yes, I know, but what I guess what I'm trying to figure out is are we going against just what the plan says and we're making an adjustment to, are we talking about just the plan, or we're not accepting a new standard within the
No, we're not.
municipality?
What we'd be doing is they'd be doing a modification of plan, which basically just means when they come in with their as-built, because this isn't even something worth going to the courthouse and re-reporting prior to completion. When they give us their as-built, when all is said and done, they give us their as-built, we record those as-built because there's been a modification to it. Then we go that route. I mean, unless Mark and David feel differently, but going to record a plan for a foot worth of,
Yeah, I understand
yeah,
that.
it's gonna be
And-
by resolution.
Just to be clear, 5-foot wide sidewalks are in the township.
No, I want to just make sure, what I don't want is that we suddenly are changing precedent when we've collectively for years tried to be very consistent so that everyone feels they've been treated fair, even if it's not what they want to hear. So we're not changing a township standard, which I think is very important. I can't think of a scenario.
You know, it looks like the shop here right next door is roughly the same width. I mean, I don't think that they did this as part of a big project, but that looks like it's about 5 foot, right? So.
And the reason that you mentioned that the Home Depot site has 5-foot sidewalks, are they concrete or are they asphalt? Concrete.
But they had about a little bit more than us, they had about 2,000. Only got 300. Above us.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm familiar with the site. I just didn't know if that got changed from what we're seeing here when it was finally opened. Other members, what do we have to say?
Street view already.
Yeah.
I don't think you can go up yet.
And I noticed we also have a sidewalk entering into our parking lot, that's concrete, 5 feet wide. So it's for continuity, we just thought it all should be concrete. It'll last longer, easier to maintain.
And it's more eye-pleasing than walkway. I mean, not that the road
The materials, all of those things, it's strictly following past practice, because once you start to break that down,
Yes.
what rules do you have? You know, and that's my concern, that my initial thought was that, no, this is not something that we should be moving on. Feel a little differently now that I realized that it was actually just because of your selection that you made puts you in a different category, but it's not changing a township standard. And that was my misunderstanding. Anyone, I mean, offer comments here? I've been doing most of the talking here.
No.
I don't think we're changing any precedent township. I think from what we learned here tonight, we're just changing some words on a plan, and that's all. I mean, after the meeting, I have a really big question. Why is there a foot discrepancy between asphalt and concrete? But I don't think we need to talk about that now.
Just clarify for me and for listeners in the audience, what is this 6 foot versus 5 foot? To me, it sounds like there was a township standard for 6 feet.
When it's macadam.
Right, so that was what they intended initially. They changed to concrete. So initially, that was what they wanted.
But if this
Yeah.
was coming in front of if this was coming in front of the planning commission 3 years ago, whenever it came in front, and on the plan, they had 5-foot concrete sidewalks, it follows the ordinance, right?
All right, here, do you want my philosophical interpretation of
It's-
why sidewalk or 5-foot sidewalk versus 6-foot wide trails? Trails are harder to install, narrow, and when you install asphalt trails, you tend to get the grass growing over the edges, and you end up with like what was a 4-foot trail is now a 3-foot
Yeah.
asphalt trail. And then when you're constructing them, you can use a small paver, pave a 6-foot trail versus they don't make 5-foot wide pavers. So from a construction standpoint, it's easier to construct. Just 6-foot trails make more sense. Also, from a planning perspective, trails are really intended for bikes and pedestrians and dog walking. They're intended for more pedestrian traffic, where a sidewalk tends to be for developments, things like that, where you end up with just the people that live in the subdivision or just the people in that town. Also townhomes, you end up with narrower sidewalks just purely because there's less room available. But
How do you determine if you have to build a sidewalk versus a trail?
I agree. It typically is a selection that you make at the beginning of the process. I think if you were connecting trail to trail to trail, it's one of those that's decision you make kind of within the land development process. So that's my philosophical.
Moya, we're all green up here, so enlighten us with your many decades of experience.
Okay. The 6-foot macadam paths came into existence in the 1988 zoning ordinance. Prior to that, it was strictly sidewalk. And the 6-foot width, okay, so I would prefer to have 8-foot or something, but Dennis Hinkle has always resisted more than 6 feet because of potentially driving vehicles on the paths. Typically, the macadam paths are used along suburban roads and so forth, and as you get more urban, then it tends to be more sidewalk. it really is pretty much left up to the planning commission to determine which they want to have. But in a lot of cases like this one, I know I was indifferent when I was on the planning commission then when we were approving the plan. And so the decision was made that he requested to have a 6-foot macadam path. And that's fine. And so now he's coming before you and requesting a change to go to a 5-foot concrete sidewalk built to township specs and so on and so forth. And personally, I don't see any problem with it.
It wasn't, my only comment for clarification, thank you, was it wasn't presented, in my opinion, that way initially. And that caused the confusion.
Right.
It wasn't presented initially. Initially was presented that 6 foot wasn't allowed because of the poles and because of all these other issues.
Yeah.
So that created this quagmire. Now it's clear that 6 foot would work. So for me, it's just, it was slightly misleading the way it was presented, as opposed to the way we're understanding it now.
Right.
It's more of a design change, as opposed to it couldn't be done.
So if we, Nate, if we need, or
Sorry.
whoever wants to.
discussing- I was trying to clarify. You're asking to go to concrete instead of macadam?
Yeah.
Correct.
Why?
Better appearance, can be eventually used. Full sidewalk coming from across the range of the park, at the range, from across the street, to walk up the side, or if they're putting park in, didn't, the car repair, to actually walk on the sidewalk, come in. It also matches the decor of the sidewalk, curving of the property itself.
Internal. Was the base built for concrete or macadam?
Oh, you dig down, you have to already put the base in and the stone in. 5 foot. Yes, we would have to change the base to go back up. Yeah, we would have to.
So it's built for.
I think has a lot more information just to come here. I think we asked a lot of questions that got us to something that probably is pretty simple. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
comfortable with
This is
a
becoming-
5. I mean, it started in a different direction. It seemed like you wanted to do something that was opposed to what the township was asking for. It really came down to just your personal preference that changed from the time that you approved it to now. I'm fine with the 5-foot sidewalk as concrete, as
Correct.
as is your goal. So I don't know what we need to do to make that official. What motion?
We would make a motion to grant a waiver, I'm sorry, not a waiver. We would make a motion to modify the plan to allow for the 5-foot concrete sidewalk. That's it.
Recommend approval. Modification. to a
Yes.
5-foot concrete.
So does someone on the planning commission want to make that motion?
I will motion to recommend the approval for a 5-foot modification to a 5-foot concrete sidewalk.
I'll second that.
Discussion?
At this point, I will, if that's been approved, I'm a little hard of hearing. It sounds like that was.
No, we haven't approved it yet. We're just discussion. Discussion I opened
sorry.
up in case if
I'm
someone
hard
else
of
has a question that they wanted to add into it. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion approved.
Forgive me, I'm a little hard.
Yes, it's completely fine. There was a lot of discussion there. We even get a round of applause. This is.
That's why I want to hand it over to our engineer who needs to discuss some other modifications. As Nathan explained, we had to make some modifications to the site in order to get a CAP or corrective action plan from the county conservation.
So there's
Right.
more, is what you're
Can you
saying.
show the plan?
Yeah, these would be as-built based off of the Lehigh County Conservation District. We noted that applicants for some time have been making submissions to LCCD, but not us. So we have asked them to provide us with an update on these items, these matters involving changes that the Conservation District required.
Right, the first one that we're gonna asked for is, you look on the east side of the community house, there is some coloration in there we call the Area C, where we have new concrete pads that are being downsized from the original design concrete pads. We're proposing 10 by 12s. The originals were 10 by 18, so 3 of them. And that would give you a total of 180 square feet, and that would be a decrease in impervious area. That's the first one. The second one, we go on the west side of the community house, and there is an exit door, which we are proposing a new 6 by 6 concrete pad, and then a connecting 5-foot wide walkway that goes to the handicap parking. And then the reason is, get an access to the handicap parking at this time with phase 1. Also, on the southern side of the community house, at the garage, which there's a green impervious area B, which is a credit. But then we have curbing coming out of the garage on the south side, and it has a radius that comes back like a J hook. And we're proposing that it's going to be concrete curbing, full height. And the reason we're doing that, there's a underground electrical wiring that goes into a vault that is in that proximity of that J-hook curve. And the reason is we want to have like a barrier where somebody doesn't back into the grass and hit the vault, which could cause some damage. And the next one.
Can I just interrupt? Are any of these items ones that we'll be taking action?
No,
on?
none of these we're
This-
taking action on. This
Right.
is,
This
this
is
is
purely
purely an
just-
update. They're gonna be on the modified and final as-built
Right.
plans.
So-
That's it.
Yeah, and the reason we're asking, we didn't get a release or approval from the inspector on these, so that's what we're here.
So inspectors will want to follow the earlier plans, but now we need to follow these plans.
Right, but I think as far as this board goes, I don't think we need to take any action on,
These will be administrative field changes. You're being updated.
so.
Rabbi, I'll be speaking with the township engineer about these, especially since they have to do with the corrective action plan. The issue is that people have been having to do modifications to the Lehigh County Conservation District.
Right.
And the township hasn't been seeing them, so we just need to make sure that they meet our standards.
And I guess, so to stop you there, I don't think that we need them
We
to
don't
be
need any
presented,
further
presented here
backup.
today. So I think from our standpoint, you got the waiver or the modification that you were looking for. And I think we've satisfied everything that you guys need to be here for today.
If
All
you're
right.
gonna make these kind of field adjustments, where you're adding impervious or taking away impervious or adjusting some of the curb and things like that, and our inspector is saying that you need to follow the plan because you do. What you need to do is submit that to our office. We'll do a sketch or a field modification review, which is just look at the changes you're making and say, yeah, that's fine, or it's not. Then we get hit in the plans and now you're building a building based on the plan.
All right.
You got plan
Thank you.
changes?
I guess
Make change to
the
the plan,
last issue that
follow the
we
new plan.
maybe have is the
Yeah,
the
so
wearing.
if we've done with that, there's another issue. So we met with the administrative staff several years ago to discuss a two-phase plan because we didn't have the financing to complete the entire project. So what we did was we
Rabbi, this is something that you don't have to worry about with the planning
Yeah.
commission either. This is a purely administrative item that actually may involve the solicitor at some point in time in your developer's agreement. There's nothing the planning
So
commission.
this
can
has
do.
to do with the question of whether we can defer constructing the wearing code.
That's purely administrative. That wouldn't be a planning commission item. That would
That's
be
purely admin-
specifically with the solicitor, the engineer and staff.
Well, I had discussed that with you in spring and summer, and it sounded like I needed to appeal to someone else about this ruling.
The
Not-
appeal was for your walkway. The paving is an administrative item that the planning commission is.
Yeah, not something that we need to handle today.
Yep.
When can that be resolved so we can let the site developer know what we should do?
Yeah, we'll bring it up to the solicitor. I mean, a lot of it depends on what's in your developer's agreement. If you can recall, there's a. recorded
Probably
plan
my
that's
last
phased.
question will be resolved this way too, but for the, just so, I may talk to you briefly after the meeting's over. That has to do with a letter of credit. We're trying to change the letter of credit from one bank to another.
Yep, we just need a letter of credit agreement. And once we have a letter of credit agreement taken care of with your new lender, the transfer can
Okay.
take place. That's an administrative item that you don't need to worry about.
So I talked to our banker today, and he says he's waiting for you to, he sent you a letter of credit template. He just wants to know if you want to change the wording and need to know the amount. And the amount now is different because so much of the work has been completed. I submitted to you all, based on all of our records, all the work that has been completed, therefore, this is the remaining work to be completed. And so the letter of credit should be based on that amount.
So, I mean, I think that it would be best, I mean, that sounds like a one-on-one conversation.
It is. Yep.
Instead
Okay.
of.
I wasn't clear on that. I've been trying to go back and forth with Nathan, and I did.
Yeah.
And I did try to.
Yeah,
I did
then-
tell him in advance I would ask these questions, so that's why I presented them.
Yeah, you know,
I
it's
told
good.
people Not to.
We took care of the heavy lifting. We're good. You
Okay.
guys are good. We're set.
All right.
One last thing.
As you help the last, as you probably know, when we moved the phases of the building, and we split it, phase one and phase two, we originally had in our ministry house, we originally had 6 apartments. You just went through this with the barn and the apartment. But now because of the changes that we have, we're using 2 of those apartments specifically as our ministry house. So we would like to ask for a waiver. We still have 4 apartments in this ministry house.
We paid for the
The recreation, all 6 apartments. So
Oh, we can't do this. This is new. We weren't
Uh-oh.
prepared to discuss this tonight. Please present it
Okay.
to us. We will, we'll review it.
we will.
Okay. Yeah, it's not an agenda. This part isn't an agenda item. We're not allowed to be talking
Thank-
about it.
thank you.
Wasn't publicly advertised.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you for all of you. And God bless all of you.
That's all of you. God bless you. We appreciate it. Modification.
All right, final item, department report.
Yeah, I just wanted to let everybody know, with respect to the zoning language that the planning commission had recommended the last time around. Township engineer Brian McAdam made a couple of modifications that he based off of his professional opinion to the changes. We've circulated them around. If you want to take a look at them, you can. But we are planning on having the adoption hearing for that in a couple of weeks in the beginning part of December. Just wanted to let everybody know that. Nothing's changed as far as the official map component goes. So that what I showed you before is what's going to be voted on by the Board of Commissioners. But there were a couple of text amendments to the zoning, just to make sure that we didn't run into any design issues when things would get to engineering for like driveways and such. That might happen to be in the floodplain. So that's the extent of it.
Sounds good. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
I'll motion.
Is there a second? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, good
Meeting
night, everybody.
adjourned at 8:43.
Wow.
Great.